to our study session. Can we have a roll call, please? Roll call vote.
Councilmember Chow? Councilmember Sinks?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul?
Here.
Here,
Mayor Sharp?
here.
Here.
I'm sorry, I said roll,
Yeah.
I said
here.
roll call vote.
Lisa, I said aye.
It was just attendance. I'm sorry.
I think it's I hear, right?
Right, exactly. All
I
right.
hear, you hear, I hear. We're all
So
here.
we're on to a study session to receive input on services to be provided in a new 10-year franchise agreement. So welcome. Who's doing this? Roger?
So before we continue, I think I have a question for the city attorney, because this item, nowhere does it say franchise agreement for what? Is it noticed properly? Can we discuss this item?
Yes, franchise agreement means your agreement to distribute
Recology, right?
with Recology, yes.
Yeah, but it's not mentioned in the agenda.
It is in the agenda, not the notice, but franchise agreement is specific enough to discuss the item.
Oh, it's mentioned in the staff report, but for someone reading the agenda, they would.
Right, they wouldn't know.
The agenda
Anyway.
materials.
Yeah.
But this is our one franchise agreement that the city has, and is the way the city refers to its agreement with Recology.
That's true, but the public may not know that that's the only one we have.
Next time, please pay attention to whether the public would understand our language.
Yes, I agree. We could have been more specific there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, we'll do that.
Although most people in the city might know the name Recology.
But not franchise agreement, or we have only one, and that means this is Recology.
A point taken, I understand.
Okay, all right. So who's going to be presenting this?
I'm going to start it off, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
And if you don't pardon me, I can't not say it, but we're going to have some trash talk for a little while.
how many slides are, oh God, how many slides?
No,
do you have?
it's not that long. I
Okay.
think there's 16 total. So,
Okay.
Good afternoon, Roger Lee, Director of Public Works. I'm going to be providing introduction for the study session, and Ursula Sarova, our Environmental Programs Manager, will be giving the presentation. Accompanying staff as support is our consultant at HF&H Consultants, so Mr. Peter Debler. The purpose of the study session is to receive community input on services to be included in the next solid waste franchise agreement. Receiving input this evening is very timely, as negotiations with Recology are expected to be concluded as early as next month, with staff recommending and council considering a new solid waste franchise agreement and associated rates by this coming January. The specific focus of this study session is to receive community input regarding services to continue and services to be added. Community input received to date and this afternoon will influence services to be provided in the future. We also want the community to be made aware of factors other than service levels that will influence rates, such as volatile recycling commodity markets and regulations such as SB 1383. Ursula will cover opportunities for the community to have feedback after the session and next steps. So with these goals in mind for the study session, Ursula, why don't you go ahead and begin? Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor Scharf, honorable council members. Thank you for your time this evening. Just a quick background, we do have a current agreement with Recology, as you know. It was signed in 2010, extended 2 times, and expires in January 2021. To assist with negotiation process, council authorized a master agreement with HF&H Consultants last October. And since that time, council also approved negotiating a new 10-year agreement with Recology because all conditions required in the current agreement to negotiate a new agreement had been met. Concurrently, council also authorized 18-month bridge agreement in the event negotiations were not successful. So the services we're requesting are a continuation of mandated services, a few extra services, a couple new services, and complying with 1383, which is new state regulations regarding short-lived climate pollutants. Mandated services include residential and commercial recycling and organics collection to meet a minimum of 50% diversion under AB 939 state regulations, mandatory commercial recycling under AB 341, and mandatory commercial organics under AB 1826. We'll move on to extra services. Next slides. So extra services are those beyond basic collection of the three streams and assist residents in diverting materials that should not go into the garbage. For instance, helping out with extra quantities of material or e-waste with on-call collections, or offering curbside pickup of batteries, compact fluorescent bulbs, motor oil, and cooking oil. Food scraps containers are offered to encourage and assist residents with transporting food scraps to their yard waste carts. And the compost giveaway closes the loop on the organics collection by offering finished soil amendment made from collected residential organics back to the residents. The list of services noted here are in the current agreement and are anticipated to continue based on input from the community. Extra services made available to businesses are, for instance, providing, both Recology and the city provide these, what we call slim gyms for inside use by businesses to help them with their organics, technical assistance for sorting. We educate and work with businesses for successful sorting, as well as helping right-size their services so they have enough space to meet their needs, but are not subscribed to service capacity they don't need. Extra services for multifamily, they have access to many of the same services as single-family residents, including on-call collections. Recology can also provide a tote bag to help multifamily residents transport recyclables to trash enclosures, and property managers can request containers to collect batteries and small electronics. As previously mentioned, current services are being evaluated in negotiations. Additionally, new services are also being explored. Community interest has been expressed for a few items, namely a smaller garbage cart and expanded cardboard collection options. We also wanted to ask about an annual cart washing service for the organics carts, as we do want everyone routing their food scraps into those carts. Recology estimates from previous experience in other cities that 20% of residential customers might adopt a smaller cart, although with the smaller carts, the temptation can be greater to contaminate the recycling if the garbage cart does not have enough capacity for them. Improving access to service online is also being explored. So instead of having to call in to request an on-call pickup, for instance, there could be an online portal that would enable you to request those services, look at your billing history, that kind of stuff. So we are, that's in the mix here as well. The new franchise agreement will require compliance with SB 1383, as mentioned earlier. These are regulations that are aimed at significantly reducing organics going to the landfill. This is a robust set of regulations that all jurisdictions will have to adjust to, not only in service, but in their rate structure. It is anticipated that significant coordination between the city and Recology will be required. Having reviewed current services, extra services, possible new services, and coming regulations, we ran surveys and invited feedback from both residents and businesses. The formal survey was a careful statistical sampling of 700 residents, and I always love this because we needed a minimum of 400, but Cupertino residents showed up to respond. So we had 700 residents across a range of demographics, and that was in early September. The informal survey was the same set of questions, but we made it available online so that anyone could have access to it. The main difference is that we do not have any control over who takes the informal online version, but in both the formal and informal versions, all responses are anonymous. We also made the surveys available in Chinese. Over 100 residents have taken the survey online, and a notification about the surveys and this study session was mailed on September 21st directly to 954 businesses and multifamily property managers. We do strongly encourage businesses and multifamily property managers to hop online and take our survey because turnout has been a little bit light to date. So as part of our surveys, we asked about satisfaction with Recology's collection services and customer service. And similar to the results in the last Cupertino biennial citywide community survey, satisfaction is high. Comparing, this is a list of, those those extra services again and comparing the results of the formal and informal surveys about these current services, we were happy to note that the value of services ranked almost the same across both platforms. And while the percentages differ a little bit, the order of popularity was identical except between the compost site and oil collection. As we consider the costs of these services during negotiations, though, we can weigh these perceived values, the impact on rates, and the amount of realized diversion. So potential new services, the percentages shown are those in favor of these potential new services. A lot of interest in cardboard collection, some interest in the cart washing, and a significant percentage also interested in that smaller garbage cart. We did again see the same ranking between the formal and informal surveys. Initial information from Recology indicates that offering annual cart washing could have more impact on rates than other extra services, and an annual washing might not be considered worth it. That's something we're considering. So we have invited feedback in several ways, as shown. We did conduct 2 Zoom meetings last week, one for businesses and one for residents. Those recordings are both available on our website now. And we really wanted to review with folks the current services, an explanation of these coming 1383 regulations, discuss recycling markets and labor costs, and how all of that will have an expected impact on rates. And I do have some numbers on, we did robust outreach through social media. We did direct mail through Gov delivery of email. So we reached over 300 people through Gov delivery, hundreds of people through social media, and again, that direct mail to the businesses. So there are significant outside influencers beyond these basic services that are going to impact the new rates, which we touched on before. Which services are most valued by the community that we negotiate for. Markets for sale of recyclable materials continue to be weak, so that's part of the equation. And those 1383 regulations, for instance, Recology anticipates having to hire 2 new staff to do all the auditing and reporting required by those regulations, and we may find that we need extra help as well. So next steps, if needed, staff will in November present an updated status on the new franchise agreement, followed in January by a recommendation to authorize the new agreement and rates. Public input will continue to be solicited via the surveys available online. And that web page is on the next slide, but it's also cupertino.org/new FA, that's new franchise agreement. And staff will be presenting to the Sustainability Commission on October 15th at 4 p.m. and the public is invited to attend. Survey results will be summarized by the end of this month, but input will continue to be solicited and evaluated until the new agreement is considered by council. So this is the end of our presentation. We look forward to receiving input about the services to provide in the next solid waste agreement.
Great, thank you. So are you ready for questions now?
Sure. And should I stop sharing at this point?
Yeah, you can go ahead and stop.
All righty.
So when it comes to the rates, are we going to be given like a menu of what each service would cost? So we would decide if it would be included in the new rate structure, or if we wanted to offer that, like the cart washing, however much that would cost
that
us.
is, we are working on having those presented to us as, by cost, by service, so that we can evaluate individually.
Right. And also, how many people use Christmas tree pickups, things like that.
But our recommendation when it comes to council will be for a suite of services, based on the community input that we've had, not so much to have a menu that gets selected in the future. We're going to come with a suite of services in our recommendation.
Right, but can the council decide which of the services in that suite we think are worth having the rates go up by however much amount it would cost?
Yeah,
because of course there's going to be residents that say, hey, I can wash my own cart. I don't want to be paying an extra $2 a month for a service I don't want.
Yeah, and that's the point of these surveys and getting the input now, because as we do negotiate and make that recommendation, we really need to know what the community, what council wants, so that we negotiate the right suite. But to do it one-off, service by service, that just won't work.
Okay, so you're going to present us with accept or don't accept when it comes to the new agreement.
And with the background as to why we're making these recommendations, because the input to surveys, it's not staff deciding it, it's through the input in this process that we're doing now.
You'll have data. It'll be data-based.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, we need to not just wait for people to respond to surveys, but are we doing outreach, actually calling people, or?
Well, the formal survey was, 700 people. We haven't discussed.
Wait, so that was you calling people, or that was people
That's-
volunteering to respond?
Statistical sampling.
Yeah, that was a research firm that specializes in taking surveys.
Oh, okay. So they call people, or
But
It was
Yeah.
a hybrid of calling
Right.
and emailing for responses.
And the questions
people
asked,
may or may not answer their phones nowadays, right?
well, yeah, but statistically, maybe it's all works out.
well, as Ursula mentioned, we needed 400 for it to be significant. We ended up with 700 within the time frame that we were doing the survey. And the questions that we asked are an attachment to the staff report for the study session.
So in this agreement, what's our kind of goal? Are we hoping to reduce the rate? I mean, it seems we are surveying extra services we need. Are we or maybe also giving up some current services? So are we trying to lower the rate? What's our goal?
Well, I think the goal is to provide the services that the community values, and to meet regulatory requirements, and keep the rates as low as we possibly can. So there's quite a few moving parts, but we're in that process now, and that's really why this having this meeting this evening and getting all the input that we can is so important.
So we are hoping to at least keep the rate the same, but are they planning to increase the rate because of the cost of increasing? Are we facing that pressure?
I'm sure the rates are going to go up with all this stuff.
And would we, in order to keep it the same, would we be considering giving up certain services?
Yeah, and those are questions that we asked in the survey. If people would be willing to give up services, if they want to keep them, or if they wanted the same level of services or more, or are they willing to pay a certain percentage more? These were all questions that were asked. But the headwinds are that services are going to become more expensive.
Sorry, another question is, we know that the recycling is the part that's actually costing us more money because of the weak recycling
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
So how can we help reduce the volume of recycling waste? Would separating out the cardboard help with that, which might in fact save us dollars?
Well, I think the more we can have clean streams of waste, the better. And the thing I want to be careful of is we are in negotiation of rates, and I don't want us to speculate rates going up or down really right now. Really the primary purpose of this study session is to get your input and the public's on services that you value, what you'd like to see added. That is the purpose of the study session.
I recall a long time ago, we did have a system where we separated our recyclables, and then it seems like everybody has gone to single stream recycling because having residents do the separation was not effective. I mean, does anyone still do the thing where they have that special bin where they separate everything themselves?
I think single stream like we have is the most common statewide.
Yeah,
Few
I'm just
community-
saying this because, we keep hearing that the recycling is contaminated and then no one will take it. It's like, one one or a certain percentage of dirty plastic containers, and that contaminates the whole thing. And, you know, I know my wife yells at me, why are you using so much water to clean the plastic before you throw it away? And I say, well, because I don't want to contaminate the recycling stream. And I wonder how many residents are like that. It's like, wow, my water bill's $400 a month. I'm not going to be using all this water to wash things I throw away.
Well, first, thank you for that effort. And we do emphasize empty and dry as the primary. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean, but certainly empty and is great, and dry is even better. And we can, we have that as part of our outreach, and we'll continue to push for that to keep our contamination low.
Okay.
Wait, so it doesn't need to be super clean? Dry is more important?
Well, if you're thinking about putting the containers and the paper all together, we're really trying to keep that paper dry, so that's where the empty is very important, empty and dry.
And if it's not clean, are you still able to recycle it?
So our recycling currently goes through Green Waste in San Jose, and they do all the processing. So they are able to pull things out and clean the streams up, and they still have markets. That's what they tell us. So
you mean it doesn't have to be super clean? We don't have to waste too much water on that? Clean.
I think you're asking for an answer you're not going to get.
Yeah.
Nice
Anyway.
try, Councilmember Chow.
Okay, I don't see it. I see.
I usually use soap, wipe over, and I don't rinse it. So I don't rinse it too clean. So
There's no one
I think
from the
that'll be
public.
good.
that's good enough, right?
I think so.
Right. Let's give someone else a chance. Darcy, do you have anything?
Yeah, so this is our waste management contract. It's been extended for a relatively briefer amount of time repeatedly. So this is actually a pretty important contract for our city. I'd really like to see some attention paid to what we can be doing, especially since this, appears to be the company that we're dealing with when it comes to this. What we can be doing to do our part to help reduce recyclable wastes. And I understand that the markets have changed. Can we be working with this company as a partner to try to make the marketability of these recycled materials enhanced? Because otherwise we're talking about a lot more landfill, a lot more pollution, a lot more problems environmentally. So I'm interested in that. I mean, I think this company has been a good partner in the past. And so that's my primary concern, is to see what we can be doing at this point to talk. I noticed that there is a consultant here. Is that right? And I'm wondering who that is. That consultant representing the city or the ratepayers or who?
This is HF&H Consultants.
Yes.
They're working for us, guiding us on the proposal and negotiation process with Recology.
Okay, great. So that would be Peter. Peter, hello.
Yes,
Good evening, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, good evening.
Members of the council.
And as a professional in this field, making those contracts, I would appreciate your insights into that as well. I mean, at the end of the day, the bottom line is that we're selling a lot of waste, recycled materials to China. There was a trade war. They said no more, and we can't get rid of all this stuff that easily at a bit of a profit anymore. So what can we do now? Do we need to reach out and have education? Do we need to be buckling down? Do we need to be working with our partners here? Because this is a serious systemic problem. And, if we just kind of let it slide, then, of course we can kind of fade into the background noise insofar as the problem goes. But if there's anything we can be doing to partner and think about it at this point, in my final couple years on council, I would really very much like to take this on as something of a project. So any input, from staff or from the consultant with regard to that particular that particular aspect of what we're doing here.
I'd be happy to jump in just quickly to say, Mr. Lee indicated, and I think he's absolutely correct, that the best course is really keeping streams as clean as they can be. And that'll be a key focus moving forward. It's a key part of SB 1383 is that the organic material streams need to be clean. So more broadly, what that translates to keeping the right material in the right container. So solid waste should be solid waste, recyclables, organic material, just organics. And so outreach and education will be key to that and will be very much a focal point for all three streams really moving forward.
Do you know of anything that's happening in the industry, in other jurisdictions that people are doing in order to help partner with these types of entities? Is anybody out there? I would think that if any state would be interested in it and produce jurisdictions that would be wanting to be proactive about this, it would be California. So, given the breadth of your geographic scope, I mean, are you seeing anything? Are there any jurisdictions that we can look to think about how to encourage these partnerships? Now, again, I think this vendor has done a good job, but at the same time, we're representatives of the residents. But for me, I'd like to put some leverage into trying to figure out who we could partner with to really be able to deliver this kind of environmentally friendly and proactive solution here. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that? Where we might, continue our investigations down that line?
Yeah, through the contract, probably the primary parties are really Recology, and then, as was mentioned, Green Waste Recovery, who is a recycling processor. And there's really a feedback loop there that's very important, where information comes back from Green Waste about the state of the material that's brought to them. So their ability to improve processing and improve recovery over time really is based on all jurisdictions that bring material there, getting that feedback loop, being able to get that information and then translating it back to individual customers with that outreach and education. I guess the other thing I would just mention is single stream is certainly the prevalent form of collection, everything in one container. It does have the advantage of convenience, but it has some disadvantages also. So there are some other methods that are out there that folks are looking at this point in time. And then I guess the final thing would be just to say that there is more domestic production capacity being developed now to replace overseas markets. That's not going to be a quick solution, but over time, there will be hopefully actually better, more sustainable ways to deal with a lot of the material after it's processed.
So what are good resources for looking into more information on this last item that you're discussing, the domestic markets that are developing? Should we, seek out, consultation in that regard, or would you say one of these two entities would be decent partners in, kind of examining this together?
Well, both Recology and Green Waste Recovery are very much leaders in the field. Green Waste Recovery is really a state-of-the-art facility, and I think they're very active statewide and with CalRecycle. The city is also, and Ursula is certainly very involved in tracking activities there. So there's a great deal of market development, quote unquote, market development activity happening at the state level, both for recyclables and for organic materials because of this large due demand that's going to occur. There are many cities that do not have the type of robust organics programs that you have. As they come online, there'll be need for a huge increase in that capacity as well as for recycling.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Rod, go ahead. You have your hand up. Okay.
I'm so I'm wondering what the experience has been in Sunnyvale, where I believe they've gone to a system where residential customers are expected to sort more. I know there was a lot of grumbling about it. Has that settled down? Has that been worthwhile, or as opposed to the single stream that we're familiar with?
I can just speak as having worked for Sunnyvale and living in Sunnyvale and doing that sorting myself. The difference in the recyclables is they keep the paper separate from the containers, so that solves a lot of the keeping the paper clean, and that does end up realizing a little bit better marketability, is my understanding. So they have that, and then
how is the I know there was initial grumbling, but how has the reception been for Sunnyvale residents? Do you know?
no one minds the dual stream recycling. It was really breaking out the food scraps from the garbage. So we have
Okay.
Sunnyvale has 3 carts. There's yard waste you're not allowed to put food scraps in. Food scraps need to go into a split cart separate from the garbage. So there was initial grumbling about that. It settled down for the most part.
So my next question goes to reducing what actually has to get hauled away. And I guess there are 2 components to that. I mean, right out my window here, we have a compost bin. And so we take our food scraps and put it in that bin. It's just a plastic container, right? And we find that to yield great fertilizer for vegetables and things. I'm wondering if what our experience is with promoting that kind of solution as opposed to more containers and more hauling.
We actually do support the University of California Cooperative Extension offers compost workshops, and we encourage and support participation by Cupertino residents to take those workshops. And if they complete a workshop, we will give them, they have the option to have a worm bin or a compost bin provided to them. We buy a certain number per year and provide them out. Now that everything's online, we made up a quiz for them so they can't just pretend to watch. We make sure that they know some basics before they get a bin. And so we do encourage that, and that can realize a certain amount of diversion. I mean, Cupertino is lucky that at least we can put those food scraps in that green cart in the meantime. But if you want a backyard compost, and the advantage of the green cart is it can take everything, the bones, meat, plate scrapings, right?
Yeah,
Whereas your
things that wouldn't
backyard, you want to
yes.
keep it pretty planty,
Right. Okay, and then as regards plastics, many of us have seen these movies. We have seen concerted efforts to try to move forward on various initiatives at the state level that would reduce the amount of disposable plastics we had. When I got on the council, not too long after, we banned the thin plastic bags, as I recall, and now the state has a ban. Can that be part of our equation here? And that's one thing. I don't know how much we can control what gets sold, right, as a practical matter. But given the state's heavy-duty diversion goals, I sit on the Santa Clara County Recycling and Waste Reduction Commission. We've also wrestled with the byproduct of all of this, which ends up being, in some cases, landfills that create odors and things. I'm wondering what bright ideas we have that might incent homeowners to create less waste, less stuff to haul away. Everything that needs to get hauled away is hauled away by a truck. And in my trash every week, I end up with something that's most weeks no bigger than it's smaller than a basketball, I guess. And I'm just wondering, how we get to the point where we're consuming less and having to dispose of less.
That's something actually my team is working on now, is working on a zero waste plan that would support and be supportive of our zero waste policy. And it gets at some of those issues, as you kind of alluded to, we're somewhat by the time you're throwing something away, that we're at the end of the line, right? There's a whole international, food packaging production system that we're at the end of the line of, so that we're sort of limited in what we have direct control over. But, as a city, we could promote some of these zero waste aspects. And, I know that a work council item is also the single-use disposables. And we still have that on our radar. We're working on that. There's a lot of fluffy, voluminous food packaging that could be tackled with an ordinance like that.
Packaging and more packaging, and yeah. So I would be supportive. I've spent some time with economists lately thinking about our climate goals and other things, and it seems to me that some economic signals, some financial signals to businesses and consumers toward the end of reducing the amount of stuff we have to haul away would be great. In other words, rates that are differentiated based on amount, load, our cost to dispose, things that don't, that make people, that give people some financial incentive to reduce, are things that I'm generally interested in. And I bet if residents consider them carefully, might be too. If the system gets too complicated, then it doesn't work. But seems to me like there's some, it's getting people's mind share about what they buy and how they consume. Thank you.
All right. John, you had your hand up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to make a few comments here. So I agree. Recology, I think, has been a good partner for us. And so, I want to kind of, let them know that I think their services has been very good. So then the next thing would be the survey. Great. I'm real happy to hear that the survey was effective. The question I would then ask is, from the chart, it looked like it was somewhere in the 80% satisfaction range. What speaks to me is, what were the items that they were not satisfied with? Any comment on that?
In terms of services or Recology's customer service, or?
Well, you did a survey and you were getting about an 80% satisfaction. How could that satisfaction level have been higher? Is it cost? Is it frequency? What is it that would elevate that higher the next time we have a survey done? Or if you don't really have an answer, that would be my question for surveys, is to not only be looking at where we did good, but where the improvement should be. And that's kind of what I would be looking at. Okay.
Yeah, valuable point.
So the next item is, I think, being a fairly typical consumer and a bill payer, pretty much the number one is cost. And so cost, and we all really want to be doing a lot to recycle. And so I'd be looking for, in the future, this type of discussion to have more numbers in terms of the impact on a residential household and these additional services or things that might be able to be changed to reduce. If you take like the extra service for cart washing, I heard Mayor Sharp say, well, everybody won't want to be paying $2 a month. No, I agree that I think when we're presented with some of these options, that it should have something that's, if it's going to be proposed, that it would be more representative of something that could be adopted. And by that, cart washing is kind of confusing. What, they're going to take everybody's carts and start? Probably not. That type of service would mean that a resident would maybe put a flag on their cart, a green flag or a red flag that means it needs the washing, and there'd be a standard fee, say $5, and the garbage truck then notes the address and the cart and a subsequent cart would come, or a subsequent truck would come, pick it up, drop off. There's no two-way taking it and washing it and bringing it back. No, you drop off the replacement cart for the $5 charge. They've got a freshly cleaned cart. So those types of details, in order for us to make a decision about a cart washing or some of these other ones, I think we need those details to be mulling over between now and, say, November when it comes back. The next comment would be recycling. Vice Mayor Paul saying he'd really like to see, how can we improve the recycling and less things that can't be recycled. I agree. Wow, I agree. And so my comment overall is I would see the one way to make that more of a reality would be small group. And by that, if we try to do something citywide, I think it's very splotchy and how effective. But if it was done in small group and maybe even in conjunction with the block leader program, and if there was a block leader who said his blocks are very interested in seeing what can be done to improve the recycling, bingo. Now we've kind of got something that could be a small group, could be a pilot, and could be a two-way of exchange, what they feel they could do and what in effect would be an effective way to be doing recycling and come up with something that would improve that then could be expanded throughout the city. So I would be thinking really that the way to make it progress in that would be small groups along that line. I did like the financial goal aspect, and that is, I don't go frequently to the city dump, but when you do go to the city dump, they weigh the big trucks when they come in and they weigh the big trucks when they go out. And I would imagine that they're being charged based on their load. Okay, how do you do something like that for a residential area? And we have the automated garbage trucks that pick up the carts. And so if those actually did have a register for the weight, and that then got them an additional or a reduction of 10% or 15% or an increase in 10 or 15. If people are really maybe a person who has his own business and is using his residential garbage bins to dispose of his business residue, well, there you go, making it more cost effective for the resident to have less garbage and charging when there is more. And so that financial one, I think, would be a good one. And so with that, I wait for your next agenda item for us to have a contract to look at. So
Okay, go, Leon, go ahead.
Okay, getting back to the franchise agreement. So I see that in the staff report, you mentioned the state SB 1383 legislation goes into effect in January 22nd. You expect that there will be rate increases in every city. And so then this bill requires a target of 75% reduction in organics to landfill statewide by 2025. So I'm unsure, why do we expect an increase because of this target of reaching organics landfill? What will be the increased cost be used for? What's our current percentage of organics, and how do they really measure how much organics we have in our waste? And would the increasing rate depending on how aggressive we are getting the residents to reduce? So I'm just curious about this.
Yeah, and I may be able to start because we do have quite a few food businesses in the city. We have been aggressive and ahead of most agencies in the amount of programs and how we do collect and process organics. So I think that we're ahead of many agencies on 1383. But your question in terms of will this impact and influence rates for everyone? I think the short answer is it will. I think it'll be us to a little bit lesser of an extent because we've already been proactive in it.
So what's our percentage? Do you have a number?
Yeah, I don't know what Ursula may or may not know. I just know that the reporting and record keeping requirements are particularly onerous and on top of what we are currently doing. So I know that is one factor that will affect us, but I don't know if we have those percentages unless you have them, Ursula.
I don't have them handy in front of me. No.
Yeah.
Any idea how far we are from the target? How aggressive we need to be to hit the target by 2025, I think.
Well, it is important to remember it's a statewide target, so it's not that, it's a little bit different than each jurisdiction, but the burden is just on the amount of auditing and reporting. So there's just going to be a lot more checking and reporting and
so the additional
engaging.
Cost, so the additional cost is not really strategy to reduce organics, but it's on the auditing and reporting. That will increase our garbage fee.
There is an aspect of the regulations that requires food rescue, as they call it, which is saving edible food that might get put in the organics cart and routing that to people who might be food insecure. So there is an aspect in the regulations about that. So that's food waste reduction. But for anything that's not edible, we just really we need it to be in the organics carts.
Okay, so I thought our bigger problem is the amount of packaging material and more with people shopping online. And why is the amount of food in garbage such a big deal? If if food goes to landfill, wouldn't it just become a compost over time? Why is that a big deal?
Landfills are special, so it's usually different than people think. And food organics in the landfill generate a lot of methane, and methane is 72 times more potent, of the other greenhouse gases. So it's really a climate change set of regulations that we want to get these organics out.
Okay, so it's good to get the organics out. And you mentioned the Sunnyvale two-stream recycling. I think that seems to make sense. That's not included in our survey, right?
That's not something we were considering pursuing. It would mean, truck retrofits and different arrangements for processing and
it's costly to implement.
Yeah.
But we could consider optional that if people would like to separate their paper waste and we provide a place for them to dump it weekly, then that might be an optional way for people who, especially businesses who can separate them. That might be helpful, right?
It's a thought. Yeah, I don't know that enough people would voluntarily opt into that to really make a big difference. And, if we can really emphasize keeping the containers dry, then those things can be separated once they hit green waste for processing.
But that will reduce our cost for recycling. But might increase the service fee from Recology, or we just need to provide a place for them to collect. Maybe like on top of the recycling bin, you can put the paper on top, kind of like the batteries on top right now.
Yeah, there's always a risk of that getting away from you, but
yeah,
I feel like we have a good system. We just need to really do more continue with outreach and education to get people.
Are they seeing a lot of increase in packaging material because a lot more people are doing online shopping, especially during pandemic?
Yeah, they actually call it the Amazon effect, the increase in cardboard, especially as people order more online, has
Isn't
been a
that
factor.
bigger problem we need to tackle?
We do have, we can collect cardboard curbside, and we
Is
are.
that in part of our climate action plan?
I don't know if that's specifically addressed in the climate action plan.
Well, I know Recology is already. If you have excess cardboard, you just put it out there and they pick it up. I don't know if they're supposed to, but they always do.
Just put it on the side.
Yeah, I have two more people that need to speak.
Okay.
So can you finish up?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Darcy.
And I think we do need to do plastic because I see that the plastic straw, paper straws are pretty good right now. Yeah.
Okay, Darcy, you're next.
Yes, I wanted to follow on a comment that John made. I think that there's some really interesting ideas in what he was saying. He was talking about weighing the waste and trying to figure out how we're doing as a community, and possibly even having things like incentives. I would be interested in looking at that from a policy perspective, whether that is even possible to do. It reminds me of the mayor's water challenge that we had back in 2018 when we were in the middle of a drought, and how the community actually, through something like that, is throughout the state, managed to really reduce water usage. And so I think reduction can be done pretty readily given our potential tools. I'm very interested in seeing those types of suggestions, but especially in terms of what our current partners would be doing, because we are, again, considering a 10-year renewal, a new contract. So the other part about it, I just wanted to talk again about the market-based aspect of this. Whatever we can be doing to try to connect ourselves with what's happening on the recycling end of it from a market perspective, I think is very important, because we're talking about a really significant amount of essentially garbage now that we didn't have previously. And so if it's a matter of supporting technological development, such as, I've read an article recently about how a lot of plastic could be potentially used as construction material, for instance. So I think we can really be those types of perspectives, especially if we're right at the outset of trying to design our waste stream management contracts for the next 10 years. And one thing, I just want to make a comment. I have been noticing that, at least in one of our grocery stores where they used to use paper bags, now using plastic bags. I don't know how much longer these emergency provisions are going to go, but I think it is one thing to pass emergency provisions that help that help businesses survive. It is another thing to watch out for kind of opportunistic potentially behavior. And so I understand that cardboard is and paper products may be kind of on in demand these days, but I just want us to be careful with regard to that aspect of the overall environmental issue. Thanks.
Okay, Rod, go ahead again briefly.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be brief. I had made an inquiry earlier of the mayor of Sunnyvale on how their program was working, and I hadn't heard, which is why I asked, but I now have some input from him. They have a program called Food Cycle, which he thinks is the most vital part of what they've done. And essentially it's just, as I think as Ursula said, it's splitting their food waste out from standard garbage. And they did have complaints, but he said it's actually lowered their garbage rates last year. And it's because food has a lot of moisture. So, I mean, John mentioned this too, right? Weight matters. If you he says if 60% of folks are separating, then the garbage going to landfill is lighter since the water-filled food has already been separated out. And they're moving this project to multifamily residences next year, which is a lot harder because of what's available in apartment buildings. And they now have food cycle drop-off for multifamily residences. And I think it would be instructive for us to see what we can learn from Sunnyvale's experiment in this regard. But yeah, I think the whole business about taking away the wet stuff, which is the food from what goes to landfill, taking away the wet stuff from the paper, which has greater value if it's clean and dry, all makes good sense. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I only had a couple of questions, and maybe you don't know the answer to this. If we were to tell residents to buy, say, beer, should they be using glass? Should they be buying glass or aluminum containers? Which is better for recology and for recycling and the value? I always thought aluminum had more value than glass, which is heavy and harder to recycle. Do we have any idea if we could tell residents this is how you could actually reduce the cost of what recology is paying to the recyclers?
I mean, from what I understand, aluminum is much more, it's easier to capture at the processor. It's easier to recycle into a new can. Glass obviously breaks immediately. So you're, faced with dealing with that and is heavy.
Right.
So my vote would be for aluminum, but you might want to look at the whole life cycle analysis on that.
I mean, what do they do with all the glass? I guess I always wonder because it's not that easy to recycle it. I mean, are they melting it down or is it actually just going to the landfill?
I believe they are still finding a market for it, but that would be a good follow-up question.
Okay. Because I think, like others have stated, it's not just hauling everything away. It's how can we reduce the amount that we're generating and, maybe generate the right kind of waste as opposed, to the wrong kind. Personally, I take all my cans and plastic bottles and I give them to the Boy Scouts for their recycling drive. That may reduce the value to recology if more people did that. I know that they don't allow people to go rifling through your blue bin looking for, deposit items. Anyway, let's see. That's all I had. There's nobody wishing to speak. So I guess that's it. This is just a study session. We're not voting on anything.
Can I ask one more question?
If it's brief.
So I'm still trying to figure out how come this new state bill will result in an increase in garbage fee. Because if we are reducing the amount of organic food in the landfill, we are reducing the weight that we are saying, right? Wouldn't that reduce our garbage cost rather than increase it? So where would the increase come from and how much are we expecting?
Well, the cost to process, say, garbage and just dump it is much lower than the process to recycle the materials to have a beneficial use later.
So the cost to recycle food scrap would be higher.
Higher. It's
compost.
Yeah, it's more expensive to process it than it is just to landfill it.
Oh, I see. And then how much more increase are we expecting? Do we have any idea?
We don't yet.
So this would result in more increase in our recycled material. So we should encourage more backyard composting.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. The input's been good.
Okay.
When you see this topic come up again, it'll help all of us to have had this conversation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we can adjourn the study session, and we have 14 minutes until the regular session. So see you all in a few minutes. Bye.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's get started. No pledge of allegiance. Can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Chow. Councilmember Sinks.
Here?
I here.
Councilmember Willie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Paul.
Here.
Mayor Sharp.
Here. Well, okay. So first, let me do the report out from the closed session. Let me see if that's here. You sent that, right, Heather? Oh, here we go. Okay, closed session report. Okay, so we had a closed session earlier this evening. It was conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. One potential case. Counsel conferred with legal counsel regarding one potential case. No reportable action was taken. So we are on to the ceremonial matters. I have two proclamations. The first one is a proclamation declaring October 4th to 10th as Mental Illness Awareness Week. So I will read the proclamation and it will be sent to the appropriate parties. Whereas mental health is part of overall health, and 1 in 5 adults experiences a mental health problem in any given year. And whereas approximately 1/2 of chronic mental illness begins by the age of 14 and 3/4 by age 24. And whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause among young adults, and 90% of people who die by suicide have an underlying mental illness. And whereas long delays often occur between the time symptoms first appear and when individuals get help, while early identification and treatment can make a difference in successful management of mental illness and recovery, and whereas it is important to maintain mental health and learn the symptoms of mental illness in order to get help when it is needed, and whereas every citizen and community can make a difference in helping end the silence and stigma that has surrounded mental illness for too long and discouraged people from getting help, and whereas public education and civic activities can encourage mental health and help improve the lives of individuals and families affected by mental illness. Therefore, I, Mayor Stephen M. Sharp, and the Cupertino City Council do hereby proclaim the week of October 4th to 10th, 2020, and every first full week of October as Mental Illness Awareness Week. The bottom, I can't read. In the city of Cupertino to shine a light on mental illness and fight the stigma. Okay, thank you. And the next proclamation is for a proclamation for Code Enforcement Officer Appreciation Week. Whereas code enforcement officers provide for the safety, health, and welfare of citizens throughout the state of California through the enforcement of local, state, and federal laws and ordinances dealing with various issues of zoning, housing, animal control, environmental health, and fire safety. And whereas code enforcement officers have challenging and demanding roles and often do not receive recognition for the job they do in improving quality of life for residents and businesses of local communities. And whereas these dedicated officers are highly qualified and highly trained professionals who share the goals of preventing neighborhood deterioration, enhancing communities, ensuring safety, and preserving property values through knowledge, training, and application of housing, zoning, and nuisance laws. And whereas the state of California and the city of Cupertino want to recognize and honor code enforcement officers that serve our communities and acknowledge their role in leading the way to improve quality of life within our communities. Therefore, I, Mayor Stephen M. Sharp, and the Cupertino City Council do hereby proclaim the week of October 4th to 10th, 2020, and every second week of October as Code Enforcement Officer Appreciation Week in the city of Cupertino, and encourage all people to join in recognizing and expressing their appreciation for the dedication and service of those who serve as code enforcement officers. Thank you. Is there anyone that wanted to speak on this item? Let me see. Not seeing anyone, so thank you. That ends the proclamations. Madam City Clerk, are there any postponements?
Postponements, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we are on to oral communications. So this portion of the meeting is for persons wishing to address the council for any matter within the jurisdiction of the council, but not on the agenda. So if you want to speak on an agenda item, please wait for that item to show up. You get 3 minutes, and I see one hand raised. Welcome, Jean. Oh, 2 hand raised now. Welcome, Jean Bedord. Go ahead. Let's see. Do I?
And I'm sharing something for her. I just have to bring it up really quick.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I've allowed you to talk. I think you need. Okay, you're unmuted now. Great. Go ahead.
Very good, but I'm waiting for my slides.
Sorry,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
having just a little problem locating it. Let me try another way. Let me go in through email. Okay. Here we go.
Okay, it's not up yet.
Yep.
I'll start the timer once you have the slide up.
Okay. Here we are.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Great. Yes, it's up
We
there.
can see it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, can you maximize it? Or okay, there you go. Great.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Scharf and council members. I am here to urge you to responsibly support our local schools. Later this evening, you will be deciding on support of state propositions. However, there is no mention whatsoever of local propositions, which are far more important to residents. Next slide. Our school districts are financially strapped, and as a community, we need to support them through tax measures. The ballots that residents will be receiving in the next few days has the Measure M, which renews the $98 parcel tax for our local high schools. Since it is a tax measure, it needs 2/3 vote to pass. It's at the very bottom of the ballot, so it runs the risk of ballot fatigue. Your support is needed to ensure that this passes. In contrast, several candidates have proposed an alternative tax based on square footage for CUSD. Berkeley is cited as a successful example, but it is a renewal. New taxes are harder to pass. Changing tax base is not a solution to CUSD funding due to declining enrollment and the immediate need to cut $5 million to $7 million in costs for the next fiscal year. Next slide. Tax measures are really hard to pass, as well as expensive to put on the ballot. This year, both Measure O and Measure H got majority votes, but failed to reach 2/3 to pass. FUHSD has already considered a square footage parcel tax. They did a study in 2018 at a cost of about $25,000. They found that such a measure only had 58% support, so it didn't make sense to do a ballot measure that would fail. Putting a tax measure on the ballot is expensive, mighty expensive, and that money can't be recovered. Jurisdictions typically put measures on the ballot in election years, which would be 2 years from now, to get the lowest cost. In addition, running a campaign requires private fundraising, since public monies can't be used for this purpose, and fundraising is not easy. So I urge members of the council to be responsible by supporting Measure M for our high schools and stop spreading misinformation about the square footage parcel tax. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gene. Next we have Mooney. Welcome, Mooney. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and the Council. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk. So I know this is an election season and signs are propping up, everywhere, and right of ways and, and properties, that don't belong to anybody. Like, it's probably, the city owned properties and, Caltrans properties. And the city looks ugly with these signs, right? So what is code enforcement doing, right? Can we do something about it? So I really want to request the city to enforce the code as strictly as, you would enforce for any residents when they violate any code, right? So, I mean, I go around and I do install signs for a lot of the candidates and propositions that I support, because I care about the community and I care about the issues. So I do go around and install them, but I follow all the code guidelines. I do it the right way. But then I see all these signs propping up everywhere. Just looks ugly. So I would request the city to do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam City Manager, can you respond and tell us what code enforcement is doing? Because I know we all have seen
Yes.
a plethora of illegal signs going up in our community.
So we have them in a number of places, if not, just basically everywhere. So code enforcement is going through each area where we have complaints and doing the appropriate research and documentation. And then, if appropriate, notifying the candidates to give them 48 hours to remove, which is what the Muni Code requires. And then if they are not removed, the code enforcement person will go pick up those signs and store them and notify the candidates of how to get it out of our storage at a cost to the candidate or candidates. So that's what's currently happening. There's just a lot of them. And not that many code enforcement people, so we're moving as fast as we can.
All right, great. And hopefully the city clerk can remind candidates that they can't place signs on private property with permission or public property at all.
And for the public, Cupertino operation is complaint based on this matter. So unless someone complained, city doesn't go out and enforce it proactively. So if you do see it, you do need to complain.
But Madam City Manager, if code enforcement notices illegal signs, despite there not being a complaint, they still do something. Is that true?
They can do some things. So for example, over the weekends, when we have half a work year, mostly to manage and do code enforcement in our parks and open areas. They will work directly with the sheriff and can do some things, but mostly we try to abide by the Muni Code and try to treat everyone similarly. Although again, I would say that while Councilmember Chow is correct, it is complaint based. The Muni Code does say that we are to provide 48 hours, and I wouldn't want to treat anybody differently than anybody else. I can certainly provide a more detailed update if needed a bit later.
Okay, very good. Next up is Sudha Kasamsedi. Welcome, Sudha.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Sudha Kasamsedi. I am candidate for Cupertino School Board this election. I'm also Fine Arts Commissioner for City of Cupertino, and today I'm representing myself. It's definitely not a hidden fact that CUSD is facing budget deficit today. We definitely need new thinking and fresh perspective to bridge this budget gap. I have done a lot of research on this, and I strongly think square footage model for parcel tax approach is the only long-term solution that we have. This is a new idea, but not an imaginary one. Berkeley Unified did this. I actually talked to them for hours and went through their contract documents as well. It's been working great and it passed with a thumping majority. Idea is very simple, and why this would work, because it potentially does not increase any additional tax for homeowners, but will give us revenue from other sources. For example, as a homeowner today, we pay a parcel tax of $250 per year. An apartment complex with 200 units, which is built on a single parcel, and that entire complex is also paying $250 every year, and we do have density of kids coming from there. So if we switch to square footage model, at 10 cents per square feet as an example, a 2,500 square feet home will still pay same $250 per year, whereas the apartment complex with 200 units at 1,000 square feet will pay $20,000 per year. So that's a lot of revenue. And this is not an imaginary idea. And we do have exemptions. Berkeley residents overwhelmingly approved this model. And you can find more details on my website, sudaforcust.org. Yes, Measure O failed in the past because of lack of awareness. Today, parents are more aware of what's happening with our schools. So it's right time to message and make sure that we rally the support from our community. And we should have this proposal in March ballot. And I'm confident if we put a survey to our community, you will see an overwhelming support. I'm requesting our city council to support this and help spread this awareness in the community. This is our chance to solve our financial crisis for our Cupertino Union School District and save our schools. I want to remind Ed Foreman's quote, if you always do what you have always done, you will always get what you always got. It's time for new thinking and new ideas rather than staying hopeless in solving our problems. We should take charge and solve our problems. Thank you very much.
I don't see any more hands raised for
Mr.
oral
Mayor?
Yes.
If there are no other live speakers, I do have an emailed read from the public.
Okay, go ahead.
This is from Mr. John Kolsky. With this email, I am filing a formal complaint against your city traffic engineer for causing a major safety situation and an obstruction on our neighborhood streets, making it dangerous to drive or walk off of the streets near the intersection done by him without notifying or asking any residents if we wanted the dumps he had installed at the intersection of Merriman and Alcalde Road. We were not told why they were installed, and there was no study done to justify them, much less if we wanted them. A major number of residents do not want the dumps there in our neighborhood. We want them removed ASAP. John Kolsky. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So has can staff respond to this resident, or have they? Roger, unmute. There you go. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've spoken with Mr. Kolsky on this particular issue on a number of occasions, and the installation of the speed humps at Alcalde and Merriman help to deter people from turning south onto Merriman when they're going west on Alcalde. It helps them from taking that turn too quickly and going into oncoming traffic, and the bumps help to keep them where they need to be at the right time. That's the reason why they're there. They are not a safety hazard.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, I see one more person raise their hand. Welcome, Tessa.
There we go. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi there. Just wanted to comment on item number 9 of the agenda today. Oh, you said not that on the agenda item. Sorry about that. It's my notes here. I wanted to suggest that the graffiti that's off the freeway 280 going southbound, that's right before Wolf Road. I've been meaning to call in and just suggest that we do something very economical where we invite artists, other cities invite artists to paint a mural, and perhaps some of the graffiti artists, which some are very talented there, I might add, might want to volunteer their time to do something like that and then not have to keep repainting and costing funds from the community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Roger, is that something that Caltrans has to approve? Because that's their property, isn't it?
I think I can respond.
Okay, go ahead.
I believe this particular location if I'm not mistaken, is Water District property. We are aware of the tagging. It is quite large. There was a mural contemplated there from, and anybody who knows can correct me if I'm wrong, but because I'm speaking from memory, which is faulty these days, of the Fine Arts Commission to put a mural there, and for whatever reason, it kind of fell off. So I am having a meeting on this with code enforcement tomorrow, actually.
Okay, great. We are looking forward to that response.
Mhm.
Okay, and now there's no more oral, so we are on to the city manager's update on emergency response efforts. Welcome, Madam City Manager.
Okay, I can't promise this is going to be 5 minutes today, but I'll go as quickly as I can. For COVID, we're up to 130 cases of COVID-19 in Cupertino. While this number remains low relative to the rest of the county, we did see an increase of 25 cases just in the last 2 weeks. I don't know what to attribute this to, but I would like to implore people to continue to wear face coverings, be diligent when you're outside. And this is probably one of the reasons I am going to be a big advocate of remaining pretty conservative in our approach to how we handle, the emerging requests for events, et cetera. And I will talk a little bit about Halloween because we did get guidance from the county on how to handle that. So that's 25 cases in the last 2 weeks, and I think that's pretty significant for us. So again, I don't know directly what the cause is, but it's a little bit alarming. With that said, though, tomorrow, October 7th, will be our next free testing site provided by the county at the Cupertino Senior Center, open to everyone. Appointments can be made from 9:30 to 3:45. And the last time that I saw our calendar of appointments, we had a lot of availability. So I encourage people to schedule an appointment to come in or just do drop in because we do take those as well. Appointments are available to everyone, including employees, and you do not need to be a senior or a member of the senior center to get the free test. It's designed for people without symptoms. If you or a person looking for a COVID test have symptoms, please contact your health provider. Access to the appointment site can be done in two ways, either sccfreetest.org or directly to scl.fulgentgenetics.com/appointment. Now, both of these have been posted in our COVID updates and our website, and so I'm going through it kind of quickly. So that's our testing opportunity tomorrow, and then there will be another one 2 weeks from then. The new potential health order coming up has been discussed, and I'm not sure if anybody's heard about it. There is a possibility and some optimism that Santa Clara County will move into the orange tier, given the state's framework that was established about a month ago. There's only one other city that's in the orange tier right now, which is San Francisco. If we do move into the orange tier, we would know by next, I think it's Wednesday, October 13th. And so what I'm going to talk about next are those new health orders that would go into effect on October 14th, should the county get into the orange tier area. Basically, there's a framework that outlines a lot of the requirements for certain business sectors that I've outlined prior. And there are two areas that Santa Clara County would keep in the red tier, so the more restrictive tier. That would be indoor dining and indoor gatherings, both of which will be controlled to 25% capacity or 100 people, whichever is less. And that's for both dining and gatherings. Both of these categories will remain in the red tier guidance. And I just repeated to you what the capacity and numbers of people allowable are. Outdoor gatherings remain the same, which is about approximately 60 people, less than 60 people, socially distanced, face coverings, and with a way to control the population, such as registration. I make that point because as I go into the Parks and Recreation update, you'll hear a little bit about what we're doing for Halloween and how it maps to what the lower risk category of activities for Halloween will be. We do continue to see high usage of the tennis courts during this pandemic, about over 1,300 reservations, and the Blackberry Farm Golf Course at almost 800 reservations. The numbers were slightly impaired due to poor air quality this last week due to the fires. Hidden Treasures, which is an annual beloved activity by the community, this year will be a virtual succulent fundraiser from October 26th to October 30. And again, nobody has to take notes on this. This is all on our website. McClellan Ranch Park, outdoor lecture series this month will include Night Sky, Skulls and Snakes, and classes at the blacksmith shop will resume in November, which is also something the community really enjoys. So for Halloween, I've gotten several inquiries on what we might be doing. The Santa Clara County specific guidance with activities for Halloween basically are in 3 categories. Lower risk, which is stay at home and keep it small. Moderate risk, like if you must do something, keep it a moderate risk. And higher risk, which is please avoid. And there's a whole list of activities in the guidance that I believe we've also posted. So as a result of that, the city has developed some activities that keep us in the lower risk category. The Halloween Spooktacular giveaway done by Cupertino Cares. We're giving away Halloween buckets for kids. There are 1,500 available with 1,200 to 1,300 already registered for. You need to register at www.rec.org for Cupertino residents only. And then they are available for drive-through pickup at the Quinlan on 3 separate days. October 22nd from 12 to 3. October 23rd, which is a Friday, that's from 2 to 5. And Saturday, October 24th from 9 to 12. Please bring your receipt if you've registered for these Halloween buckets. Additionally, there's a drive-in Halloween movie that's being arranged, Hotel Transylvania, on October 30th and 31st, Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. in the Blackberry Farm parking lot. Again, that needs to be registered for as well at the same registration website, reg4.rec.org. So that's our plan for Halloween, and I think it's going to be pretty fun. Inclement weather, extreme heat, we did experience that along with very poor air quality as a result of some of the fires last week. We activated the cooling center at the senior center on Tuesday, September 29th through Friday, October 2nd. And while we only had 20 attendees during that 4-year period, they were there for a longer period of time due to the air quality and
I think
very
you meant
much
4-day, not 4-year period.
I'm sorry, 4-day period. 4-day period. They were there for a longer duration during the day due to the poor air quality, and they very much appreciated the senior center being open for that purpose. I'll give a summary update on homeless encampments. The outreach and engagement by the county to the encampments along Wolf Road had been ongoing through this last week. As of Monday at 5 p.m., there's approximately 15 individuals that remain in the homeless encampment at Wolf Road and 280. The area north of 280 on Wolf Road has seen a reduced number of structures over the last few weeks. These structures were removed voluntarily. At least 2 structures and apparently some abandoned property remain at the north 280 location. And then during that same time period, the area to the south of 280 has increased in the number of structures. Outreach and engagement teams will continue to work with the individuals to assess any barriers to temporary housing or permanent housing. Specific outreach this week will be done with the encampment members regarding the apparently abandoned property to the north of 280. In other words, we're going to try and figure out if they really did abandon that location. Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office deputies will continue to build off of their positive and collaborative relationship with encampment members. And the deputies will encourage any owners of the property at the north end to voluntarily move the property as soon as possible. Most of the week, last week, was spent with multiple agencies trying to figure out what his potential solution or offering has been to the encampment members, kind of out of coordination with either the city or the county. We're trying to figure out if it's a tangible offer of housing. And so what we'll do is we will continue to support the county and others to make sure that those conversations happen this next week as well. As always, we're committed as a city to help them to get to a pathway for housing for all members as a priority. So that's the update for that. I do note, I think it's because of the extended isolation that we've all been in. It's interesting statistics. Our permit applications are significantly increased from the same time period last year, as well as our 311 calls or our 311 submittals to our system in terms of complaints. What we've noticed, though, is the complaints have become a little more uncivil, a little more angry. And I think it's because people have been isolating now for months and months and months. And that, IT does give you a sense of anonymity in a way. So I would like to just remind everybody to be really aware about how the isolation is affecting you as a person, and, try to do what you need to do to get outside and move around and exercise so that we can keep everything as copacetic as possible. As a little update as well to our Black Lives Matter policing or community forums on policing, we had 2 of them. We are having on October 14th, our next community forum on implicit bias from 4 to 6 p.m. And more to come on that. And that's been pushed out and advertised. So thank you. That is my update for this council meeting.
Yeah. Okay, great. Do any of the council members have any questions for the city manager before we move on to committee assignment reports? Okay.
I have a question. Do we have any data on demographics of the COVID cases, their age?
No. The only thing we can go to is the statistics kept on the Santa Clara County COVID website. It will give you age for the county, though, not the city. It will give you age statistics by age group, and it will give you cases by broad ethnic backgrounds. But that's about as detailed as it gets.
There are some places there are more cases in senior centers, and so we are not seeing that kind of trend.
Not that I can tell, no.
Okay, that's good.
In fact, if you're pulling on like our senior communities, we have not heard that there's been any COVID issues with either of the ones that we would hear from.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you think the increase in cases, we seem to be doing less testing now, so it couldn't be because we're doing more testing that the case numbers have gone up so much?
Well, I have a guess. It happens to be about 2 to 3 weeks after we have kind of opened up more field use. We opened up playgrounds about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. I don't know, perhaps those are just coincidental things, but it is really difficult to figure out why such a significant increase in the last couple of weeks. Those are the only two things I can pull on. We have had some more frequent complaints about people that are like out in the fields and stuff, but not wearing masks and not socially distancing. And we did open basketball courts at one of the.
Isn't the county doing contact tracing? So do we do anything to ask these people to figure out what might potentially be the cause so that we can try to prevent future transmissions?
Yeah, I believe they are doing tracing for individual cases. I don't know of any statistics available to individual cities. I can certainly ask to see if there are any trends that they see or what the actual statistics tell them. But my guess is that the contact tracing results in some of the statistics posted on the county COVID website, which it's pretty informative. But again, we're not going to be able to break out too much city by city.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Actually, I find their dashboard disappointing in a way because it seems like they are almost intentionally not disclosing all the information per city in a way that we could make use of it to take steps. They still have not disclosed the fatalities per city after all these months of asking for it.
I'm just wondering, can we possibly do a voluntary survey of those people and see whether they have attended any?
Well, we don't know who they are. That's private information.
It's voluntary that they can fill out confidentially.
We would not know who they are, so we don't know the 130 people that have it or had it.
We don't have any way.
We don't have any idea. It's HIPAA protected information. So I will say, though, that if the city, like city staff or anybody here has it, we have our own way to see in our system when you check in. Like if I got sick on some certain day, they would be able to see who else was in the building. So it's kind of nice. We can do it ourselves for city staff and council that come to City Hall.
Okay, great. John, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. If we're talking about the testing and that, 23 just in the last couple of weeks, at the testing, are we giving out some type of information so that people know how to proceed should they be found to have it? Where do they go? Do they go back home where they have the possibility of having their family members affected? Are we providing that kind of information to them? Test them, great, but then what's the next step? Where do they go?
So I want to make sure that for the testing, these are county testing sites facilitated by the city at multiple locations in different cities. And they do hand out specific instructions to anybody coming in for testing. If somebody comes in symptomatic, for example, we do have an isolation room, so we can isolate them and get them or they can get themselves to their care provider. So yes, I believe that there is literature that goes out to them specifically about what happens. If anybody is symptomatic, this is the testing that is happening tomorrow is not for you. If you're symptomatic, you need to see your care provider. Thanks for the question. Good one.
Okay. All right. Seeing nobody else with their hand raised, we can move on to item 4, report on committee assignments. John, why don't you go first this time?
Okay. So on the 16th of September, we finally started up the school, CUSD, and the city council 2+2 meeting. Yes, we did hear about the financial hardship that they're in, and they feel it's very important to stay in close contact and communication with us on that. On the 24th was the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability. I'll let Councilman Paul give the details on that since he's the primary one. On the 16th, we finally started our housing subcommittee and we set our goals and our framework. So hopefully in early 2021, after the holidays, we should have something. And then I'd also like to report that Councilman Chow and I had our roundtable on September 26th, the first of what I believe was going to be a fairly regular event. And the main topic was the homelessness and the tents that the city is having and the homeless people, and how can we as a community be helping them. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Council Member Chow, go ahead.
I just have the COSD meeting with John and the Housing Survey Committee that he has reported. And I'd like to add that the 2x2 committee with COSD, we listed some topics that might be of interest to the school district and parents so that our staff can provide a brief update. So it might be interesting for a lot of parents to attend in the future. Yeah, and then also for us to understand what COSD is working on and what they need. Yeah.
That's it. Okay. Councilmember Paul.
Yeah, thanks. So the SVRIA meeting that John referenced was fairly brief. That's the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority, a set of communication towers that our agency, represented by various members of the jurisdictions in the South Bay, have put up for emergency purposes. We have really good news. On September 8th, all 31 sites were complete. Most of the major agencies around here are on board, including the two ones that serve us from a fire protection and a public safety perspective. We contract out to county for both fire and the sheriff's office for policing services. So that's on board. It's effective. The executive director, as I've mentioned in the past, is retiring, and we are still in the midst of the search. The search goes well. I think we may well be able to announce a new ED fairly soon by the next meeting. And there is a video camera project on the key sites that has been completed as well. Again, very, very brief meeting, but the SVRIA is running well. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I will go next. So I had the West Valley Mayor's meeting on the 23rd of September. A hotly debated or talked about item was how we choose the VTA board representative for the West Valley. So each section of the county gets a representative. And we discussed potential changes to how we would select that representative. We discussed the dues structure for the West Valley Mayor meeting. Before COVID, we used to go all meet at a restaurant for lunch. And since COVID occurred, we're doing everything on Zoom, which is a big, a moderate savings of expenses. So there will be no dues next year. We had a COVID-19 update from the city managers, including Deb. Despite our increase in cases recently, we still do remain the city with the lowest per capita number of cases by quite a large margin. I think next is Saratoga, and they're nearly twice as many cases per capita as us. We had a presentation from a company called ClearGov. They provide kind of IT services that help cities do things like budgets. So that's something we might want to look at in the future to see if we're interested in following the lead of other cities and using that. The next item the only other one I have was the unhoused task force. I believe Rod is also on that. We had a good presentation of the various types of different emergency shelters and how much each one costs. It's quite, um, there's a big difference in costs ranging from, almost $25 a night per person to up to $134 or higher for a motel or tiny houses. Sanctioned encampments, that is the cheapest option, even cheaper than safe parking, but not free. You still do need to provide services like toilets and washing facilities. So, this is a huge concern right now with COVID. We're kind of getting money from the federal government and state government to deal with the unhoused population on actually providing more services than we could pre-COVID when we didn't get all that money, like Project Room Key and the money from FEMA and the CARES Act money. So, once COVID is over and that money dries up and the motels need to go back to be used by their owners for regular hotel guests, we're going to be basically in a world of hurt because all that housing is going to go away. All the money to pay for it's going to go away. And so the unhoused task force, basically looking into what are we going to do when all the once COVID is over and what's continuing now during COVID. So it's a question of money, like most items. Where are we going to get the money to provide these services once the state and federal funding dries up? Okay, that's all I have. Go ahead, Rod.
Thanks. I'm going to focus on one particular thing, which was what's happened with VTA. You'll recall when we last talked, I think the PAB had reached a unanimous recommendation of a transit lane project. So in other words, we would widen the roadway with transit-only lanes in the median with 4 stations, including one at Stevens Creek and 85, adjacent to De Anza College. It was the recommendation that many of our environmental activists and folks had asked for. So it was terrific. We immediately ran into a buzzsaw at VTA. The Capital Programs Committee, which is a subcommittee of the board, took this up. They were not provided with the data from the business community that showed that there are 5,600 average daily riders in the corridor. VTA staff preferred a narrative saying that, this is not a corridor conducive to transit, which the memo that came from Silicon Valley Leadership Group based on a summer survey roundly refuted. 39%, by the way, of those 5,600 riders live in San Jose. So San Jose, Sam went on the attack and said, I don't think these numbers don't indicate we should do very much here. I'm very pessimistic and skeptical. He then repeated those comments at the full VTA board meeting last week. And 4 council members worked on a motion, which was a substitute to the recommendation that the thing move forward. Sam Liccardo, Raul Perales, Magdalena Carrasco, and Lon Dieppe wanted to burden our project with a big land use study or a land use study of some sort to basically say, well, let's see if your land use really warrants a transit project and ridership. They had not subjected their own projects in San Jose to this. Fortunately, that motion, the substitute motion, was defeated 4-7. And notably, we had with us Cindy Chavez, who is VTA's chair this year, along with Susan Ellenberg, Cortese. She served as Cortese's alternate that night as Cortese wasn't there, as well as Chappie Jones. So we have them to thank from breaking ranks. Otherwise, our project would have been in the backwater of a amorphous land use study. And I'm quite, I was quite concerned, as were other board members who stood together on this. Frankly, VTA doesn't know how to conduct a good transit study, and they sure don't know how to do a land use study. Burdening the project with that would have been time consuming and expensive of taxpayer money that we passed in 2016. So Glenn Hendricks is the next board chair. He was supportive of the project, as was Rob Rennie, our representative. John McAllister, of course, in Mountain View, Jeannie Bruins, Larry Carr, Cindy Chavez, Ellenberg, were all on board with this. Although Cindy said, we ought to be looking at land use all over the region and so forth, but we shouldn't be burdening this one project at this time with any such thing. So that's the basics of what happened. We had a lot of support. We had a lot of advocates come out. I'm to the board and with written comments. We expected this to pass on consent, but Sam wanted to pull it. So it then got, the better part of an hour's worth of discussion. I looked at this bruising fight, which is, big city against small cities. And I thought, wow, this is quite a board. And my cohorts in Mountain View and Los Altos, who have a lot of experience, said, no, we won. This is fine. Don't worry, Sunnyvale. But we got wind this morning of a new development at VTA that ought to be of concern to all of the cities, which is a larger issue than just this measure. And that is that there is a move afoot before the end of the year, apparently, to bring to the board of directors a use of the Measure B funds that would preclude funding any of the projects, the transportation projects, except BART to San Jose for 10 years. Oh, yeah. So they would fund bike and ped projects. They would fund half of the money that we won for roadways in all of our cities. That's on a pro rata basis. They would take half of that, apparently. And then all of the other proceeds of the measure would be taken solely for BART to the BART Phase 2 project, to the exclusion of the 85 project, the grade separations project for Caltrain in Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Palo Alto. These were very hard fought negotiations back in 2015 and 16. So there's a lot of concern about this. They want to bypass. It said the advisory committees, including the TAC that Roger serves on. And I don't know if Roger wants to comment at this time and fill in any details. There's apparently an ad hoc effort going to try to have some input into, what is essentially, it's not a redirection of funding, but basically by saying, well, we don't have as much as we thought because it's COVID. We're going to get ours now. You all wait 10 years. I think it's really an inappropriate action. Roger?
Well, thank you, Councilman Sinks. I will be attending the TAC meeting tomorrow at 1:30, and I hope to be placed upon the ad hoc task committee that you mentioned, and I'll have more information to report out after that.
All right. Well, I've alerted all the people that helped us with the 85. Getting the 85 measure through. I mean, fellow electeds in these other cities. So they're now aware of this. Some of them weren't, who are actually serving on the board. So that's my report. Stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.
Let me say one more thing. So after the substitute was defeated, just to be clear, we did get a unanimous vote on the main motion. So this did move officially into what VTA calls the alternatives phase. Now, whether we have any money for the next 10 years to do anything is a big open question. Okay.
All right, very good. So we are on to the consent calendar. Did anybody wish to pull anything from consent? If not, I will take a motion. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So can I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar? Is anyone here still?
I'll go ahead and make the motion to adopt the consent calendar items number 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Wonderful. I will second it.
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharf.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. I get, Madam City Clerk, there are no second readings,
That
I
is
presume,
correct.
and no public hearing. So we are on to item 9. Amazingly, we are 9 minutes early to this. It's unprecedented. So this is a discussion to adopt a position on Propositions 16, 19, and 21 and Measure RR and Measure S that are on the 2020 general election ballot. So this came up at the last Cities Association meeting. I did not have direction from council on Measure RRS or the other measure, the open space district measure, but that last one I felt confident in going ahead and voting aye to support it. Measure RR and S were I was hesitant to do that for a couple of reasons. Measure S is from the Santa Clara County Water District. It's an extension of an existing tax, only this time there is no expiration date. I was concerned some entities have come out against this, including the Sierra Club, and I was hesitant to support this without more discussion. It probably is too late. The Cities Association already voted to support both these measures. RR is the Caltrain sales tax. And again, I was not alone. Many other cities abstained, saying they didn't have direction from council. RR is a little controversial because it's more funding of transit through sales taxes, which many people believe is a regressive way to be funding transit. But at the next meeting, which is Thursday, they will be discussing the state propositions and taking positions on those 16, 19, and 21. So I definitely would not take positions on my own on any of those. I would want to get direction from council before voting yay or nay or abstaining. So can we have a staff report?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Casey Elliott from Townsend Public Affairs. I want to provide you guys with some background on the measures that you're speaking about. Kind of launch right in, and feel free to stop me in between, but otherwise I'll plan to cover all three and then answer any questions. Proposition 16 was placed on the ballot by the legislature via ACA 5, and that measure would permit government decision-making policies to consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin in order to address diversity by repealing the provisions that were put into place in the state constitution in 1996 via Proposition 209. So that measure would not, Proposition 16 doesn't alter any other state or federal laws relating to equal protection or prohibiting unlawful discrimination. It purely is based at repealing the provisions of Proposition 209. As such, there's the legislative analysts and others have found no direct effect on fiscal effect, no direct fiscal effect on state and local entities because it doesn't require any change of current programs. Obviously, it would depend, any ultimate fiscal effect for the state or local governments would depend upon future choices either at the state or local level to implement programs or policies. Like I said, the measure itself, since it was legislatively placed on the ballot, it received more than 2/3 vote in both the Senate and Assembly, supported by a number of organizations, which I've provided in the staff report, though I would note that should be viewed as kind of a capture in time. As we know, this time of year, lots of different individuals and organizations are jumping on to support or oppose various ballot measures. So this kind of provides you a snapshot. Should not be considered a complete list, but just kind of gives you a flavor of who's supporting and opposing the ballot measure, which is the same as for the remainder of them as well. Proposition 19 is a little more technical in nature. It deals with property taxes and property tax transfers. This was also put on the ballot by the legislature through ACA 11, though I should note that this measure, ACA 11, was a compromise with proponents that had previously qualified an earlier ballot measure. So Proposition 19 replaced the previous version that had qualified through the initiative process. The legislature likely would not have done this on their own were there not a proposition had already qualified for the ballot. But essentially, Proposition 19 would permit homeowners who are over 55, severely disabled, or whose homes were destroyed by wildfire disaster to transfer their primary residence property tax base value to any replacement property anywhere in the state. Currently, there are limited opportunities to transfer your base property tax value either within county for a lower valued property or to select counties that have opted to approve that. This would expand that statewide. Also, it increases the number of times that a homeowner could use this transfer. Under most conditions right now, you can use a one-time transfer. This measure would allow for a three-time, use those provisions to be used up to 3 times. Additionally, this proposition would make changes to assessments of properties that are inherited properties. So essentially right now, current law allows for transfers of properties between parents and children, grandparents, grandchildren, and this would allow that to continue to occur. However, assessments would need to be required under certain conditions, the primary of which being that the person that is inheriting the property would need to move into the property as their primary residence within 1 year. And if that can't occur, then the property would be reassessed at a higher value, though not the full value if it was sold on the open market. The revenue that's generated through this measure obviously is going to vary depending upon various conditions. The Legislative Analyst's Office anticipates it would generate tens of millions of dollars in statewide property tax in the onset, which could grow over time. That funding would be distributed through property tax distribution formulas. Additionally, there are provisions that would direct some of the funding to be used for firefighting efforts. So again, this was a measure that had been put on through the realtors and other folks. The compromise measure, which is form of Prop 19, has been endorsed by a number of state level folks, including the governor, Governor Newsom, the state treasurer Fiona Ma, the state controller, and a number of groups, including professional firefighters, senior associations. There are concerns from some groups have expressed, since we are talking about it raising revenue at the state level, that would imply that overall on the balance that property taxes will increase on a whole. Obviously, that's going to vary homeowner to homeowner and circumstance to circumstance. But overall, this is a revenue generating measure. And then the third of the state measures
can I interrupt
is Proposition of course.
So it generates more revenue. So whose property tax savings are being taken away that currently had them?
Generally speaking, it's going to be in inherited properties that transfer ownership. So if a parent passes a property to a child or a grandparent to a grandchild, right now that would be it would maintain a certain property tax base. Under this proposition, if that person who inherits the property does not use it as their primary residence,
right? Okay,
then
so they turn it
after
into
a year,
rent.
then there would be an assessment.
So if they turned it into a rental, they wouldn't get the Prop 13 benefit anymore, or not all of it anyway.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Quick
all right, sorry to
question.
interrupt.
And then also, yeah, I should also note that there would also be revenue generated just through the idea that people who may stay in their current homes right now to maintain the base property tax benefit, they may move, may be more willing to move properties,
Right.
thereby freeing up long-term properties, which could then be reassessed when they're sold under the normal market conditions.
Right, makes
So,
sense.
yeah.
Just
And
a-
then
Hold on, John, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, on that same topic. So if an inheritance and the inheritor then moved into the property, great, he establishes or retains that thing, but for how long? I mean, is there a clause in there that if he moves out after 12 months, that then it falls back to the thing? I mean, making sure that something like this isn't going to be allowed to trick the system.
yeah, and that's likely going to be based on how the new homeowner would file with the county. So, for example, if you inherited a property and declared the new property as your primary residence, that could have tax implications. If you have an existing residence, for example, you wouldn't be allowed to have the double primary residences. Yeah, it's going to be. I don't want to tell you that there won't be ways to game the system, but as far as I can tell, I don't think there's a minimum requirement for the duration of which it would have to be your primary residence.
Thank you.
Oh, so there's no minimum duration. So you could move in for a month and then rent it out and you would get the tax savings.
Yeah, you would have to declare, through declaring it with the county as your primary residence. So you'd still
Right,
fall
but-
under all the.
Right. But
Yeah.
like John said, if after a year you say, oh, it's not my primary residence anymore, does it get reassessed then? Is there, any, exactly, what stops someone from gaming the system, like he said?
Yeah. Presumably you would lose your. I'm forgetting what the base
Okay.
denomination is. The $7,000 homeowner principal residence. But yeah, to your point, that would not declaring
Right.
it not as your primary residence in and of itself would not trigger a reassessment.
Okay. Yeah. Just losing the homeowners. I mean, the whatchamacallit, the homeowner's exemption is not that much of a savings, but losing the old assessment would be a huge increase in taxes. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we have to read it to see it. I mean, there's got to be something in there that stops someone from moving in and then a year later saying, "Oh, now it's a rental."
Yeah, and I will double check the text of the initiative and get back to you definitively on that.
Okay, all right. Go on to 21.
Yeah, and then 21, it's similar to a measure that was on the ballot a couple of years ago, but it would amend state law, Costa-Hawkins, to allow local governments to establish rent control on residential properties over 15 years old, and it would allow for local limits on rent increases to differ from that at the statewide level. So specifically, you're talking about right now under Costa-Hawkins, there's allowed you can't have rent control on properties that were occupied after February 1st of 1995. So by modifying that to 15 years, then you do capture a new element of housing units that you could provide rent control on. This would not apply to those individuals that own 2 properties or fewer. So this is not intended to go after kind of small mom and pop rent, landlords, property owners. Additionally, it would allow local governments would have to allow rent increases in rent controlled properties of up to 15% over the first 3 years of a new tenancy. So that way it wouldn't violate any California laws related to landlords' right to fair financial returns. So if a local entity chose not to institute rent control, then it would default to state law in these areas, which would be AB 1482 from just 2 years ago.
Right. Okay. All right. Did you prepare anything on the county measures? MMS?
Yes, within the staff report, there is some background information on measures RR and measure S. As you mentioned before, measure RR would be a 1/8 of a cent sales tax that would last for 30 years, would raise an estimated $108 million a year to expand Caltrain's operations. The measure was facilitated through state legislation that was necessary to kind of allow some elements of it to happen. Ultimately, the legislation, which was passed in 2017, allowed the Caltrain board to put the measure on the ballot. Sorry, hold on here. Let me grab my. The tax proceeds would be prioritized to support operations of Caltrain service, to support expansion of peak hour service from 6 trains per hour per direction to 8 trains per hour per direction, to develop and implement programs to expand access and facilitate the use of system by passengers of all income levels, to help leverage other local, regional, state, and federal investments and capital projects, and then lastly, to provide Caltrain with a steady stream of revenue to support annual ongoing operations, maintenance, and capital needs.
Okay, and S.
And then measure S, as you mentioned earlier, this would make permanent the current annual parcel tax of $67.67 per home that was approved by voters in 2012 and is currently scheduled to expire in 2028. That funding would help ensure public health and safety by protecting drinking water supply from earthquakes, climate change, would also go towards reducing pollution in waterways, providing flood protection. The measure itself contains $263 million for flood control projects, $54 million to help with seismic upgrades to Anderson Dam, $155 million for creek restoration and wildlife projects, $51 million for creek cleanup projects, and $53 million in community grants for environmental education and conservation projects. And those are pretty much the basics. Again, happy to answer any questions on related to any of those measures.
Okay, thank you, Casey. So, does anyone have any questions? Am I muted here or not? Anyone have any questions for Casey? I do see 4 attendees that would like to speak on this, so I will go to them first. So you each get 3 minutes. I'm sure I'll butcher this name. Dubra Dubé, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Shubra Dubey, and I'm a Lindbergh alum from the class of 2020 and a current UCLA freshman. I am urging the City Council to vote yes on Prop 16 and support equal opportunity for all. So just looking at the ruling of the landmark case Bach versus Board of Regents, the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action is fine, except if you're using specific quotas. Prop 16 would not implement quotas, but would invest wealth in communities of color, improve access to quality education for all, and create opportunities for women and people of color to receive public contracts. Notice how quotas are still prohibited. So going off of the judicial precedent, Prop 16 is constitutional and fair. But moving away from the nitty-gritty of the actual proposition, I would like everyone on this call to critically analyze your lives and inspect your own standing within the community. Notice how systemic racism is apparent in almost every facet of our lives in Cupertino. How many Black people are in positions of influence in your job, in your school boards, in this very city council board? Prop 16 is not taking away your rights, but ensuring equal opportunities for the systemically disadvantaged. So the way I like to look at it is it's not saying that if you are against a person of color in an interview, they will automatically get chosen. But instead, it is giving that person of color the resources to even apply. So please acknowledge your privilege, do your research, and vote yes on Prop 16. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Ashida Dubey. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ishita Dubey. I'm a Lynbrook alumna class of 2016, a UCLA alumna class of 2020, and I am currently completing my master's in science at USC. I also strongly urge the committee to vote yes on Prop 16. As someone who has worked through the higher education system and has in fact benefited from the current legislature, I strongly support ending the ban on affirmative action, as this is only the first step in repairing these centuries-long injustices of systemic oppression and racism. Opposing affirmative action is not, in fact, there's no division to be had when people of color from higher socioeconomic statuses, in fact, already have advantages in the higher education system. So again, I would strongly urge you to vote yes on Prop 16. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to Muni Mathapatla. Welcome, Muni. Except you just disappeared. Muni, are you there? Okay, there you are. Go ahead, Muni.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Muni Madhipatla. I'm a resident, so I'm representing myself. And I strongly urge the council to vote against Prop 16. And it's a bad idea concocted by politicians in Sacramento. Prop 209 is doing fantastic. And ever since, that passed, I think, California has done wonderful. We moved from, being 7th largest economy in the world to 5th largest economy in the world. So that's truly working. And, and our colleges and everything, has gone up and, in rankings, and as well as, the people that, come out of colleges, the drop rate, decrease. So the Prop 209 is working wonderfully, right? So this Prop 16 is electoral politics that's being played by politicians in Sacramento, and we don't need that. Those are the kind of things that's done in third world countries, not in an advanced country like ours, right? So, and moreover, there is no data that suggests that government using race as an attribute to fix things is helping anything better, because there are about 38 states that are still using race-based affirmative action. Those states are not doing any better. Right, the race relationships in those states are no better. So this is a solution looking for a problem. Right, we don't have a problem to fix. So please vote again, no on Prop 16. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Muni. Oh, I did want to point out that since these were all lumped together in one agenda item, if anybody wants to speak on other propositions, you could speak on each one if you want to. Next, we have Neil McClintock. Welcome, Neil.
Hi. My name's Neil. I'm a resident in Cupertino, also CHS alum, De Anza alum. I wanted to second the thoughts in support of Prop 16. The previous commenter pointed out that Proposition 16 is apparently a concoction of Sacramento politicians. Oh, if that's the case, I'd like to point out that Prop 209, which is our current law, was put forward by Pete Wilson, more or less, who wanted to use it electorally, capturing anti-immigrant and racist sentiments. Pete Wilson has since endorsed Donald Trump for president. So I don't know that looking to our history is actually, and who supported Prop 209 is actually very useful. So there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to Prop 16. Even if that line of the Constitution were repealed that Prop 209 implemented, the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act would still prevent discrimination. To say so is incorrect and it's incorrect. Quotas are already banned under Bakke v. Board of Education or Board of Regents, as a previous speaker pointed out. And I just wanted to emphasize really like Prop 16 is not that radical. It more or less would allow public institutions, not just schools, right, but also like governments, like your own governing body, the city of Cupertino, to do what private businesses already do. Diversity initiatives, right, like considering people on the basis of their race and using race as one of many factors. That's what a lot of businesses do when they're trying to decide how they're going to diversify their staff. So it's just really expanding on that in the public sphere. The ultimate mission of a government, of a school, is not to award people based on merit. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to create the best possible inclusive mission, the best possible institution. And so Prop 16 allows us to do that. For a city like Cupertino, it would mean a lot. It would allow us to basically help jumpstart Asian American businesses and other minority businesses instead of having to put them through the traditional bidding process. That's why the city of San Jose unanimously endorsed Prop 16, is because they saw the benefit of allowing Prop 16, allowing the city to actually consider contracts based on those that are most needed in the community. And in terms of whether or not Prop 209 has worked, it depends where you look in terms of higher education. I went to Berkeley. Prop 209 reduced the population of our Black student body by more than half. Only 1.8% of the student body is now Black as compared to what it was before, even though we're right next door to Oakland. But even beyond that, it's not just about higher education. It's also about our schools, right? Like Cupertino is like 80, 70, I don't know the exact number, percent non-white, predominantly Asian American. Yet the faculty, the administration are almost all white. Prop 209 would allow us to rectify that so that students are actually learning in an environment that they feel comfortable in and that they feel seen. So I highly encourage the City Council to support Proposition 16. It's transformative, but it's not radical. It's reasonable. It would bring us to where many states already are, and it would be a really big sign of support for a lot of potential minority-owned businesses and for our existing students as well in our schools, and also for your own city government that would benefit from having increased diversity initiatives and contracts. So thank you for the time. I yield.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Justin, welcome, Justin. Go ahead.
Hello. Hello, City Council. My name is Justin, and I also want to briefly talk about my thoughts on Proposition 16. I'm also a recent graduate of Cupertino High School, and I am a Chinese student here. I'm aware that many Asian members of our city believes that affirmative action is discriminatory against Asians, and I want to bring in some historical context to show how this is simply not the case. Long before the Chinese community stood against affirmative action, there was first Chinese for Affirmative Action, an organization formed in the 1960s. Chinese for Affirmative Action supported consideration of race in hiring and school admissions because they saw that even between two families of the same income in the same town, achieving a good academic standing was much harder for a Chinese student than a white student at the time. They pointed out that there was no bilingual education or something comparable to the ELD programs we have nowadays. And therefore, Chinese students perform much worse academically than white students with the same ability and academic potential. So, Chinese people, along with other Asian groups, actually fought for affirmative action in this country so that schools can recognize this type of disadvantage cut along racial lines, while racist white politicians pushed Proposition 209 to ban affirmative action in California. Nowadays, more and more of the Asian community is composed of highly educated and relatively well-off immigrants that came later. And as a result, we aren't really affected by systemic racism as much anymore. I think Cupertino is a perfect example of this. The Asian students are given a great privilege of gaining an education in our amazing school district because their parents can afford the high housing prices here. Though this is definitely not the case for other groups of minority. I think we all know that we have very high population of Hispanic people in our general area, yet they compose very little of our school population. And just because myself and many other Asians now have this privilege, that doesn't give me an excuse to become selfish and now stand against these other groups of minorities that are still disadvantaged by interpersonal racism, underfunded school, discriminatory policing, and so on. Black and Hispanic communities still face racial oppression today, similar to what Asians felt in the 1970s. And it is truly discriminatory when we tell schools to turn a blind eye to this reality, to say that schools must just ignore these very relevant racial factors that contextualizes individual achievements. I think tonight proves that a lot of other young Asian people, or just young people in general, feel the same way as I do. And I hope the City Council and others here can see our perspective. Thank you.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Sydney G. I grew up in Cupertino and graduated Monte Vista High School in 2014 and UC Berkeley in 2017. I am urging the council to either refrain from adopting a stance or to vote in favor of Prop 16. There are definitely some common misconceptions about Prop 16 and about race-based affirmative action in general. Many people may believe that passing this proposition and re-legalizing race-based affirmative action would harm the chances of Asian kids to get into higher education institutions. The data that exists from both CA and other states does not back up this claim, nor has the absence of race-based affirmative action, which we've had due to Prop 209 in our California colleges, shown a benefit to Asians' odds of getting into these schools. If it did, we would not expect to see that across the board. UC admissions rates for Asians have decreased since Prop 209 was passed, even as Asians make up a growing proportion of the state population. There's a study from the National Commission on Asian American and Pacific Islander Research and Education, or CARE for short, analyzing this. And also, particular Asian groups would benefit from having race-based affirmative action, such as many people of Southeast Asian ethnicities. Prop 16 would not legalize racial quotas since that was already long banned, nor would it mean that people would be dehumanizingly reduced to nothing but their race. Prop 16 would merely mean that applicants could have their race and gender taken into account as factors as part of a holistic review of them as people. Furthermore, it seems that a disproportionate amount of attention is paid to race-based affirmative action, but I do not necessarily see the same amount of outcry around other kinds of affirmative action that are currently legal, such as preferences for athletes, legacies, children of rich and famous people, and so on. Given there has been a study showing that on average, an Asian applicant needs an SAT score 140 points higher than a comparable white applicant to get admitted to the same school, I would think that energy might be better spent opposing the continued impacts of white supremacy on our society, rather than attacking measures that would seek to level the playing field for people of color. I would also suggest that people familiarize themselves with the history of college admissions processes and how these have actually changed in ways aimed at limiting how many people racialized as non-white could get into these schools. For instance, needing to submit personal essays, recommendation letters, show a breadth of extracurriculars and so on are actually a result of this. PBS Frontline has a website that goes into this historical context with a focus on our UC system. The website is called Secrets of the SAT. Karen Brodkin's book, How Did Jews Become White Folks, also has a section talking about this. I would recommend either taking a position of yes on Prop 16 or at the very least abstaining from a recommendation, because calling for a no on Prop 16 sends a harmful message about who you believe belongs or deserves to be a part of Cupertino and to receive a high quality education. Publicly opposing such a measure that would help balance out the historical and current impacts of racism and sexism on people's lives would have really damaging consequences, and it's time to stop the harm that Prop 209 has caused already. Thank you.
Great. Next, we have Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Peggy. Whoops. Okay, go ahead, Peggy. Peggy, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Mayor Scharf, Vice Mayor Paul, council members and staff, I urge you to not pick and choose. I think this is very decisive. I think this whole agenda item should have been put in more of a study session where all the propositions could have been put up similar to the League of Women Voters, but allowing people who have spoken tonight to express their opinions and their reasons. I don't think it belongs in a city council meeting. And particularly since you didn't add the Measure M, which is within Cupertino, I think I would urge you strongly to not pick a side, particularly Prop 16. It's very decisive. And I don't think it's going to win no matter what you decide. It doesn't belong in our city council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Next, we have Selena Lee. Welcome, Selena.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hi, my name is Selena, and I am a graduate of Lynbrook from class of 2019. I'm a Chinese American student. So I would also like to comment on the City Council's potential decision on Prop 16. I'm urging City Council to either avoid making any kind of decision for or against Prop 16 or come out in support of it. Prop 16 and affirmative action are not about taking opportunities away from people. It's about providing equal opportunities to groups who have historically been denied them. Most of the discussion around affirmative action in Cupertino is about the practice of affirmative action in universities, but we have to remember that it also applies to employment and public K-12 education. Affirmative action not only pushes for racial equality, it also promotes gender equality. Prop 16 would invest in women by fighting against wage discrimination and supporting women-owned businesses and opportunities for advancement in the workplace. It would also resource underserved students in low-income communities, as well as improve representation and diversity among educators, which has been shown to improve student performance. On the other hand, Prop 209 hurt women and POC, or people of color-owned businesses, as contracts awarded to women and Asian American-owned businesses dropped about 70% after Prop 209. So Prop 209 did hurt Asian Americans as well. And we need to remedy that and support those who lack access to opportunities. On the other hand, in terms of college and university, I've heard a lot of misinformation and fear-mongering being spread among the local community, even making its way into my own family. There's no evidence that affirmative action hurts Asian Americans in college admissions. It is not in any way about putting Asian American students down, but about uplifting opportunities for historically underrepresented students in higher education. Finally, I'd encourage community members to remember that race will only be one factor used in college admissions, as it can't be used as the sole factor in an admissions decision, and as well as to remember our privilege and the opportunities denied to Black and Latinx folks and students due to systemic racism, and to look for arguments on both sides of Prop 16 to make an informed and unbiased decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last we have Nathan Lee. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Nathan, and I graduated from Monte Vista in 2020. I am Singaporean American of Han Chinese descent, and I strongly urge the Cupertino City Council to support Proposition 16. This summer has highlighted the unequal effects of the pandemic and police brutality, among many, many other social injustices that disproportionately affect Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. BIPOC folks have been, and still are, systemically held back from the resources that Asian and white students have been able to access. Even living here in Cupertino, being able to attend amazing schools and access amazing resources and extracurriculars is a product of racism. Redlining and segregation in the Bay Area decades ago has still allowed me to flourish today. My Asian family has the privilege to be able to afford to live in Cupertino, while Black and Hispanic families are turned away from jobs in tech and forced into less rigorous schools. Affirmative action would allow BIPOC students the same amazing resources that I and other Cupertino students and residents are able to access. As Neil said, Prop 16 is not radical. If you think about it, legacy students and student athletes are experiencing a form of affirmative action that has never been challenged. San Jose and other cities have already endorsed Prop 16 because they recognize the good it will do for every community. When we are diverse, we are all stronger. Neutrality is a voice to the oppressor, and I urge you to consider your privileged positions as non-Black people of color and white people making decisions about who does and who does not belong in Cupertino. Please support Proposition 16 to support racial and gender equality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Vikram Saxena. Welcome, Vikram.
Hi, I'm Vikram. I'm a resident of Cupertino. I'm speaking here to strongly encourage you to support no on Prop 16. Prop 16, while it is being framed as enabling affirmative action, is actually removing the section which prevents the state from discriminating or giving preferences. So while the focus is to say it would allow for affirmative action for minorities, the reality is it can be used and abused for doing anything and then be justified under some criteria of providing fairness. For example, like right now, the white population of California is strongly underrepresented. In fact, it's the only group which is underrepresented in California in the UC admissions. So under Prop 16, it would be legal to say that, hey, that we need to have more white people in colleges than what they have, regardless of their interests or the fact that many of them come from rural families or live in rural areas and they're not really interested to go in those colleges. It's not because of that they're socio-economically disadvantaged. It also opens up our state contracts to nepotism in the sense that people can form a front company, contractors and other people who get the contracts, put a person from an underrepresented minority as a front, and then actually force the state to pay more. And then the state won't be bound to get the best contract, but will be bound to support that particular group of people and pay more, which will result in increased taxes. If you look at the data since Prop 209 passed, we know that the percentage of Latinos and Black African American people going to the UCs has continuously gone up, and is now the number is a very good representative of the current population in California. So to say that the current California UC policies of using socio-economic factors but not race in helping create new opportunity for people who have been traditionally marginalized not working is not correct. So I strongly encourage the council to vote, to recommend that we vote no on Prop 60. Let's keep discrimination illegal. Thank you.
Oh, so Vikram, I had one question for you. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there.
So you said the data I got from UC's own website actually did not show whites being underrepresented. That showed non-Hispanic whites were just about where they should be, 3% overrepresented. Hispanic whites were way underrepresented at 36% below. Blacks were overrepresented, which was surprising, at 24% over, and Asians were 139% overrepresented. So where did you get the data that whites were underrepresented?
I'll have to check. I got it from this website of CIFR. And it also depends whether you're looking at UCs and UCs plus CSUs.
No, I was just looking at UCs. I have the data for CSUs as well.
Okay.
But I was just looking at UC, and not just Berkeley, but the whole UC system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You probably have better data right now, so I'll just defer to you.
All right.
But in general, the fact is that it's not that the Latino and Black population is severely underrepresented if you combine all the state universities together.
And also, when you say over and underrepresented, you are comparing it with what? With
the population, the total population.
With the total population or with the applicant pool?
No, it's about the population.
I usually would compare. I looked at UC data, also admission data, and I removed I only look at California residents because it's not fair to consider non-residents. Mm-hmm. And then I compare the demographics of freshmen admitted versus those who applied, because it's unfair to compare with California population. First of all, we don't know how many are school age, and also the percentage, the graduation rate. UC has a chart showing the graduation rate of every race, and then even among those who graduate, not all of them are eligible to apply to UC because they need to get a C or above in A to G courses. Then that percentage is lower in certain races. So, and then even among those, I think not all of them who are eligible to apply applies. So if you are comparing, there are a lot of pipeline factors.
Yes, exactly. In fact, that's the part
you need to compare with applicant pool.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, what I did was I didn't use population. I used the percentage of the high school graduating class of each race, because that I thought that was fairer, because Hispanics were 49.73% of the high school graduates in 2018, and I think that's why they're so far under for UC.
Yeah, so I compare with applicant pool, and Asian among applicants is about 30%, and among the admitted is about 35%, about 5% extra only. And for Latino, I think they are also about 30, and maybe around.
Excuse me, but can we continue our public input here?
There's no more public. There's no more. Oh wait, one person raised their hand.
Okay.
No, we are permitted to ask questions of the for clarification, but let's move on to Tony.
This is your own analysis. This isn't asking.
Welcome, Tony.
Hey everyone. Thank you for giving us an opportunity here. So I heard a lot of kids. They are like school students or just now graduated. Urging you guys to support Proposition 16. So that is how Proposition 16 can be confusing. So let's see, Proposition 16 is trying to repeal the Proposition 209. Right, so let me read this out loud to you to see why we should not do it. Right, so in our current constitution, Proposition 209 part is the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of a race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. That is what Proposition 209 is. And that is a part that all these kids are saying that's a racist part. tell me which part of that is racist. All right. So another confusing part from confusing content from the yes on 16 side is that they keep saying Proposition 209 bans affirmative action. This is simply not true. We have affirmative actions in California everywhere. Right now, we have a lot of different financial aids, a lot of aiding program, and based on the need, not by the race, right? Proposition 209 only bans the race-based government preference. It doesn't ban any of this kind of the affirmative action program based on the need. So if we start to treat people differently based on their race, sex, and color, so that is something you can never change. That is a given factor of your whole life, right? So just imagine you live in that world, right? So your kids come back one day crying to you, saying that, hey, Dad, you told me to work hard so that I can get a good opportunity. But now the school or the government or my company is telling me that because of your race and because your skin color is not preferred, sorry, I got rejected. All right, so this is the world the yes on 16 camp want us to live in, and they want us to subsidy to the government, to the big giant government who can decide whether you are preferred or not solely based on your race. And so this is the most racist government action that I have ever seen in this USA. So another thing is that, so since we already have a lot of aiding programs for the underprivileged kids or families, if we allow the race to be a factor, then what we can see is that the rich people in the certain group of ethnicity that can benefit it just for free, right? The poor people are already helped. No matter what your race, even we got very poor people in the Asian population, and we got very rich people in the so-called colored population, all right? So colored
Tony, it looks like you got muted, or you muted.
I muted because he was at over 4 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Can I just do a closing?
No, you're done.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
I let everybody go over a little bit, but you were way over. Welcome, Qinghua. Qinghua, are you there? Qinghua Huang?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
this
go
is
ahead.
Qinghua Huang. Yes.
Go ahead.
And so if you think, so I'm here to strongly urge you to please say no to Prop or Measure 16, because if you think their diversity is not enough, that is not because that the skin color. That is because we the society maybe need to do some basic foundation work. Maybe some other work did not doing good. We should work on those things. And if we should not just judge people by their skin. Who can tell me who can change the skin when they are born? They born have their own skin. And it's so unfair for people to judge them by their skin color. So please, everyone, you have your skin color that you cannot change, right? So please help us say no to it, to the Prop 16 or Measure 16. Thanks.
Okay, that is
Mr.
everybody.
Mayor,
Yes.
I do have 2 emails to read.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, first one is from Alexis Ellis. Honorable Mayor, City Council members, city staff, and fellow citizens, during the last 3 months, there have been many car rallies organized by residents through California to oppose Proposition 16. One was held in our city this July. I was in the rally and learned that Proposition 16 is aiming to repeal Prop 209, part of the California Constitution, which clearly prohibits the state from discriminating against or granting preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in their operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. Yet the state wants to repeal it. If Prop 16 passes in the November election, it means we, the Californians, allow the state to discriminate against all of us based on our race, gender, or color, and allow special treatment by the state in college admissions, jobs, and contracting. This is totally unconstitutional and against the American value of equal rights. Furthermore, I've learned that the ballot label was written in a very misleading fashion. It says that Prop 16 allows diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decisions. The legislators are playing word games with the voters. They replaced the word discrimination with the word diversity. This is discrimination in the name of diversity. Let's all not be misled by the ballot label. We should all say no to discrimination, and most of all, discrimination from the state level. Please say no on Prop 16 in November. And next is from Brianna Aguilar. Dear City Council and City staff, thank you for your hard work. 2020 has been a difficult year for all of us, but now is the time when we need you to establish your leadership over your constituency. We need you to take a different but correct stand. On this November ballot, Proposition 16 will seek voters' passage to remove this term from the California Constitution. The state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. Although Proposition 16 is summarized as a bill for diversity, it's really about governmental preferences. Proposition 16 will legalize discrimination. It distracts the focus on helping the poor and needs, instead gives leeway to the powerful and rich, especially in preferred races and identity, politicians to take advantage of government resources. While the nation is questioning the systemic racism, Proposition 16 foreshadows the systemic racism in California. That's why, as a resident and constituent, I'm requesting you join hundreds of politicians, civil rights leaders, parents, and children to oppose Proposition 16. Thank you. Great. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, great. So let's bring it back to council. We can, do all of them. So who would like to go first? And please limit your comments to a reasonable amount of time. No more than 5 minutes per council member. Who'd like to go first? And remember, the reason I even put this on the agenda is because it will be on the Cities Association agenda in 2 days. And, we can either abstain as a city or take a position one way or another on each of these ballot measures. But I personally didn't want to claim to know the will of the council on any of these. And that's why I put it on here. So, Rod, would you like to go first?
I'd be happy to. I really appreciate how this question of preferences has really created a lot of angst. I'll just give you my own perspective. And some of this comes from serving on the Air District for a time when, we have communities that really have suffered from air pollution, are close to big industrial facilities, and we've put a great deal of attention on this problem. And so I think it's important for those of us here in Cupertino to understand that we started quite a ways up the ladder of success. You think about trying to ascend to a better place, which everybody tries to do, I think. And, we ought to think about those who didn't start on an even footing as they began their climb. And let's just take, for example, wealth in housing. We know that it accumulates over generations. If you read, as one of the speakers referred to, I think, The Color of Law, it talks about housing discrimination in our backyard in the Bay Area. It talks about, how Blacks were systematically excluded from communities, how they as families weren't allowed to build wealth, how there was disinvestment in schools, how they couldn't get loans, and so forth. So they were put on a very low rung of the ladder, and quite intentionally through federal policies, state policies, even city policies. Educational opportunities likewise. Obviously, if you have the privilege of being in a place like Cupertino, people move here and they pay a premium for our great schools, right? Now, the study by the Office of the UC Chancellor, I thought was really informative, and it's 17 pages. It's quite readable. I would suggest that, although we'll express our individual thoughts about this tonight, that it would be a good starting place to understand why, educational institutions have supported this. I think that, it's hard for us to appreciate that our kids are starting considerably further up that ladder than others as regards education at various times, all kinds of minorities have faced systemic discrimination. And I would say that when we passed our resolution a few months ago, we said that Black Lives Matter. We clearly said that. And I think implicit in that, we recognize that are folks that start far down the ladder. They face challenges we can only struggle to understand, right? So we are, all of us here in Cupertino are privileged. And we have, as measured by sociologists and others, and economists, gender gaps, minority pay gaps that persist. So I think that recognizing that we're starting at different places on that ladder, equity requires that we take measures to create a more just world. So I'm personally in support of Prop 16, and I think the common good means that we work to bring those folks up who start on the lowest rungs and improve the diversity, which in the end makes us all stronger as a society. So that's where I am on that one. Would you like me to continue on the others?
Sure, yeah, go ahead on the others.
Yeah, I mean, the others, I have mixed feelings about. There are some that say on Prop 19 that there are going to be net negative consequences on property tax. So I don't know. I see the Democratic Party is supporting it. Rent control, I really have mixed feelings about, because there is the disincentive to creating new housing, which I think is important. So I don't particularly feel strongly, and I'm not even sure I know how to vote or even hear, right? Think about how I best represent people in Cupertino on these two measures. And I don't know, are we talking about RR and S, or are those done at cities?
We might want to take a position on it, even though Cities Association has already voted on it.
Yeah,
and I think you supported both of those already.
Well, I supported RR, Caltrain, and while I appreciate that the sales tax is regressive, this is about the only functioning transit system in our area that does anything for us. VTA service cutbacks are going to leave transit riders here devastated. And, Caltrain is the one really effective conduit we have that's been a political football. So this would give Caltrain its own funding source, which it's never had. As for the Valley Water thing, I think I share, Stephen, some of your concerns about a perpetual increase. Over time, grand jury reports and the Merck have called it the golden spigot, and I think in some part for good reason. So I could go either way on that.
All right, very good. Who would like to go next? And thank you, Rod. That was just about exactly 5 minutes. So good job.
I'm happy to go.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead, John.
Let's see if I can beat the 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
So, my number one comment is, discussion is the key to democracy, and the fact that we have so many people in the community that are coming to talk, and it's been, very friendly discussion, differing views. That's what makes democracy work. So I applaud everyone, including the council, that, you know, are sharing their thoughts. Councilman Sinks, with his understanding that everyone is a person and is entitled to fairness, and we then all start at the same level on the ladder. People were born into different means in different areas, and so you know, I think we just have to realize we haven't walked in everybody else's shoes and know their trials and tribulations. So now we come back to these bills, of which 16 is the one that we're really discussing. All three of them, I think, are not issues that we on the city council are going to be changing our community. And so I agree with the one resident that said, okay, this should have been a study session where we can share dialogue, we can share ideas. If we all stay individually, then we're not sharing our ideas. And how do we get a forum? Well, this is one. It's not the primary purpose of the city council, but if it brings people out to talk, I'll bet everyone who spoke tonight is going to be voting. And that's what democracy is. So my position would be that these are not these bills are not for the city council to be taking a position on. You know, we should be focusing on the ones that would affect the budgeting of our schools or things of that nature. And these ones aren't doing that. So I'll pass on those. So that's it. Am I under 5 minutes, Mayor?
You were. However, I would point out Prop 19, which does have some funding issues because it would increase tax revenue. Anyway, we will move on then. I think I have a sense here. So, John, Darcy.
Okay. Well, you're going to give me 5 minutes, right?
Right. Go ahead. I'm starting now.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm really torn as to whether to use my 5 minutes or to just use 5 seconds to say that I'm going to abstain on all this.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to go the 5 minute route. You know, I'm not going to be a careerist here anyway, so I might as well try to help. I'm going to abstain. I don't know how I'm going to vote on these personally, and I don't know what the overall sentiment of these items are in our community. As such, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to vote as a representative of our community on these items. One thing I would like to say is that I do completely agree with the speaker from the public, Sydney, about opposing the impacts of white supremacy. The phenomena of co-opting and preferences tend to follow you wherever you go and whatever position you hold. It's odd how entrenched attitudes are being addressed by actions that are quite unlikely to do anything to change those attitudes. If anything, they tend to do the opposite from what I've seen. I'm reminded of talking to a reporter back in 2018 about a totally different problem. I said to her, instead of glib hypocrisy masquerading as sympathy, that in fact makes the problem worse, how about just treating people better? That, in my assessment, is always the start of solving our problems. Let me say that I think that there is truth in what everyone is saying here, but I think that saying that affirmative action does not affirmatively and adversely impact some groups is kind of like saying putting in rent control measures does not take monetary opportunities away from property owners. I mean, it could be true, but that would have to be some pretty well-designed legislation. How are we helping out the people being cut out of the equation or whose opportunities are being curtailed? And in fact, this is exactly what my contracts professor in law school meant when he talked about finding a way to increase the pie rather than dividing up a limited pie. If affirmative action legislation came with it measures for increasing the number of spots currently available so that some who work really hard and follow the rules don't lose their earned opportunities, then that is legislation that is at least thinking about the people being adversely affected. When I speak to Chinese American students about this, the way I try to increase the pie is to talk of the general higher education system in America and tell them how colleges in other states would be thrilled to have such good students there. But I also at the same time think that I'm not really doing them the best of public service in this forum here tonight, if I leave it at that. In this context, what these students are being asked to sacrifice, given what they've done, what their families have sacrificed, and how they are subsequently treated by society, constantly expected to put their heads down and take it, while being told that they are not being treated unfairly, or more likely simply ignored, is fundamentally unfair. But I'll share with you my real feeling about all this. In my old 44 years, if you can still do well even after all these conditions, then what can touch you later in life? I would suggest that the same principle holds true for money. My wife tells me that there is in fact a Chinese expression that speaks to this sentiment, which essentially states that there are two basic ways to be rich. One is to have a lot of money, and the other way is to figure out how to optimize how you use very minimal amounts of money. In any event, these are all complicated issues, and again, I don't know how I'm going to vote on this personally. I don't know how I'm going to vote on any of these measures personally. And I don't have a sense of how this community on its balance feels about the various items. I will be abstaining. Our problems are systemic, and I'm not convinced that these are the best ways to solve them, though. I'm still thinking about these issues, and again, I'll be abstaining on this slate. I also totally agree with Peggy, like John did, the speaker who stated that the most valuable thing that we can do is to have a study session style format for these types of issues. I've found that listening to the various perspectives have been the most valuable aspect of this exercise. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Darcy. That was 4 minutes, 35 seconds. Very good. Okay, Council Member Chow.
Okay, this is challenging.
Okay, 5 minutes. I know it's
So
hard.
I abstained on Prop 15, even though I'm leaning to supporting it. So it's the same thing. I don't think the City Council should be taking position on state measures. As for the two county measures, R and S, I know that the cities association have taken position. I would not support them. I don't support sales tax to fund that's regressive, especially at this time. And then the water district thing, I don't know why they have to make it permanent now when it expires in 2028. That doesn't seem to make sense. So I am leaning to oppose both of them. And I didn't like they have to bring COVID decline ridership into as the reason. They need an operation of overhaul even before COVID. Okay, now for Prop 16, I have to take this time to correct a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation. I have done my research, a whole lot of it, and I urge all of you to truly do your research. We have to know what policies are currently working and what's the state we have right now before we go ahead and abandon or adopt new policies. First of all, Prop 16 will utilize implicit quota, a goal or target, which is legal under federal law. And whenever you use the term underrepresented minorities, you are measuring the percentage against an ideal proportion percentage. That's your target. And therefore, you are working towards an implicit quota. That's the fact. So don't tell people it's not a quota. And race-based affirmative action has not been shown to be working in the 42 other states that have been implementing it for years. California is much more diverse with much better economic opportunities for people of all races. And we are the strongest economy. We are the destination of immigrants because We don't discriminate against anyone based on their race, ethnicity, and national origin. That's not put California backwards. And then first, I'd like to point out in terms of women, California woman earns 89 cents on the dollar. It's the narrowest gap in the nation. And California has the strongest equal pay law of all states. We require equal pay for anyone doing substantially similar work. If there is any existing disparity between men and women, it's because of women's choices. Let's respect women for our choices. We may choose careers to be teachers, social workers, and caretakers, or even working part-time so that we can focus on our families. Don't discount us for our choices. California women actually are over 50% of the population in UCs. And in fact, this year and in the past few years, California women are getting over 50% of the bar exam. Over 50% of people who pass bar exams are women. And in a lot of minority law profession, Asian, Latino, and Black, woman is a majority. Women outperform men in many areas. Under Prop 209, we have excelled. But if you implement Prop 16, likely it will be used to suppress women in areas we excel, and in areas force us into areas that we do not prefer. And there are already strong anti-discrimination laws to eradicate real racism today at the state level, at city level, at every public agency. Let's not legalize reverse racism. Let's implement existing anti-discrimination laws.
Okay.
Definitely, I think we should support those people who are disadvantaged. The current affirmative action programs, which do not consider race, already give preferences to students from low-income families, from low-performing schools, from challenging neighborhoods, and from first-generation, and we give preference to first-generation college.
Okay, finish up, please. You're
As
over
a result,
5.
we have over 45% of students admitted that's first-generation college students. Diversity is important, and UC has achieved that without considering race. And police department in LA and San Francisco also already reflect their population through targeted
Okay,
outreach.
please finish up. You're way over 5 minutes.
Sorry, this is important. So,
Okay,
and then the
thank
number of
you.
Latino students have quadrupled, Black students have doubled, the number of degrees they have earned have doubled and tripled under Prop 209.
Please finish,
So
Liang. That's way over. I don't want to have to mute you.
Sorry, but if you want to reduce the number of students who earn degrees, vote yes on Prop 16.
Okay, stop, please. Okay. I'm going to go, and then I see 2 more people have raised their hands in the meantime, and I will time myself as well. So first of all, I get the sense of the council that we really want to abstain on these at the cities association. I understand that sentiment, but I'll speak regarding Prop 16. So I think it's a very reasonable goal to try to increase diversity in both UC and CSU. But I also think it's using racial preferences is a very dangerous path to walk down. In the past, racial, religious, and ethnic preferences have been used to discriminate both against and in favor of different groups. I am concerned about implicit quotas. If UC tried to match admission rates by race to high school graduates by race and gender, yes, it would be bad for Asians. It would also be bad for Blacks. It would also be bad for women. I'm not sure that's a path we want to walk down either. And Prop 16, it doesn't address the root cause of the problem of the lack of diversity in college admissions. To fix that, you have to start much earlier than college. And I think the legislature is kind of taking this as a Band-Aid approach. We're not going to fund K through 12 education properly, and they haven't for many decades. So instead of fixing the root cause, we'll just pass this law and say, okay, now we're going to discriminate by race again, and that's gonna fix the inequities in college admissions. I think we should absolutely consider socioeconomic factors. We should consider the quality of K through 12 education, and this is a kind of affirmative action that's already being done and with some success, but it could be better. Economically disadvantaged families, absolutely, they should get preferences. My wife got into UC because of that. Even though she's Asian, they were very economically disadvantaged. She was the first kid in her family to actually get a college degree. And then I'm thinking about my own kids. If you use racial preferences, how are you going to deal with the increasing number of multiracial students? I mean, is the applicant going to choose whichever race is going to increase their chances of admission? And how would you ever prove something like that? You can't verify it. Right now, an applicant's race is whatever they claim it to be, and you're not even allowed to do any verification. So, I mean, I think the best thing for the city to do is to abstain at Cities Association on this issue. But I was kind of upset to hear, quite a bit of misinformation being promulgated by the people in favor of it, because I think if you look at the facts about the current admission rates by race, what we really want to do is look at socioeconomic factors and educational opportunities that people have had or not had in the past, and achieve diversity by doing it that way. For the other measures, I'm torn on Prop 21, generally against rent control. All the experts say it ends up bringing up average rents. However, it is up to each city to decide whether to implement rent control or not. I mean, that's local control, which I've always been an advocate of. And also rent control helps, it encourages developers to build for sale housing instead of rental housing. And for sale housing has advantages both for school funding and for building wealth. Actually, that's related back to Prop 16, the lack of being able to build wealth through housing security. So personally, I'm torn on Prop 21. For Prop 19, I'm in favor of. I don't think someone should inherit a house and turn it into an investment property and reap the benefits of Prop 13. I don't think that was the intent of Prop 13, and I don't think it's fair. Measure S, I'll be voting against because it has no expiration date and environmental organizations have come out against it. Measure RR, God, I hate funding things with sales taxes. It's so regressive, but I agree with Councilman Sinks that Caltrain is just so important. And this isn't just about COVID. They've never had a secure funding source like VTA or BART. So probably I'll hold my nose and vote yes on Measure RR. I think that was all of it, and I'm at my 5 minutes, so I will stop. And
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to use about 5 to 10 of those seconds of my remaining 25 seconds.
Okay, and then we have 2 more public comments that I will let go.
Thank you. You reminded me about the infrastructure issue. I know that we're not voting on it. It's a bit past the time for Cities Association now, but my statement there was that generally when it comes to infrastructure, I do tend to support spending, but examining the fiscal responsibility of the institutions entrusted with the money that we're spending, to me, is the most important aspect. Thanks. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, normally we don't go back for more public comment, but I see 4 hands raised, so I will allow it. Domingo Candelas, welcome.
Good evening.
We can hear you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Domingo Candelas. I'm here today speaking in favor and support of Measure S. I just wanted to add a few points pertaining to Measure S and hopeful for the council's consideration. I know earlier you mentioned that the city of Cupertino is dealing with COVID with homeless residents, and the state and federal funding allocated towards combating COVID related expenditures with like the homeless response and the hole that's going to leave with the funding that they temporarily allocated. This measure will create a sustained funding source that's critical for the provision of safe, clean water and natural flood protection and healthy environment for the residents of Cupertino and the county. All Measure S funds are will be controlled locally, and they will go towards local water protection projects, and they can't be taken away from the state. Every penny from Measure S will be spent here locally to protect our water drinking supply. There are accountability measures. We have Measure S has independent citizen oversight, audits to ensure that the funds are spent as promised, and lastly, it also provides exemptions to our local seniors. Real quickly, part of the program will fund about $53.1 million in grants and partnerships for local governments, agencies, and organizations like Cupertino for different water conservation, pollution prevention, creek cleanups, and wildlife habitat restoration projects. And again, this is a sustained long-term source funding that could be used for partnerships and critical measures that go towards improving the lives of the members of our community. So with that, I urge you to support yes on Measure S, and thank you for your consideration.
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah, briefly, you can ask him.
So why are you guys renewing it now when it expires in 2028? And also, why Sierra Club is concerned with the grant programs that you guys have?
Great question, council member. I believe Rachel Gibson is on the line, and I think she could better address some of those questions. So I will defer to Rachel if that's okay with you, council member Chow.
Sure, Rachel. You can answer council member Chow's question. You still get your 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor Scharf and members of the council. Rachel Gibson, I'm with the Yes on Measure S campaign. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. In terms of the benefits to Cupertino, I wanted to start actually by saying how this came about. We obviously have, as Councilmember Chow mentioned, an existing program that doesn't expire until 2028. But the fact of the matter is that parts of the existing program are broken right now. So rather than drive a broken car for the next 10 years, why wouldn't you just fix your car when you have the chance? So we took that chance. We engaged in a large, broad community level effort we got 21,000 different comments from folks about what of the current measure could potentially be improved. And we folded that into and also included a blue ribbon forum and invited obviously members of the Cupertino City Council as well as members of the Cupertino community to participate in that effort much earlier this year to tell us what of the current program would you like to see improved, what would you like to see fixed. I heard some comments earlier in the council meeting today about issues with creekside encampments and homeless encampments. This renewed measure, if passed by voters, would provide almost $40 million for coordination with local governments and agencies to clean up those encampments that do nothing but contaminate and really damage waterways like Regnart, Junipero Serra, and Calabasas Creeks. This is right here in the Cupertino community. So those are part of the issues that we're trying to rectify with this new renewed program. In addition to that, I heard Councilmember Chow ask about, why renew it now? Again, why would you want to wait another 10, 13 years to fix something that or almost 20 years to fix something that is broken now when you have the chance to fix it? And I also want to address, she mentioned Sierra Club has an issue with grants. Domingo, one of my colleagues, mentioned that there are $53 million in grant funding available in this new renewed program. One of the issues we heard from folks is is that, hey, we don't want to have to wait every other year to apply. We would like to apply, and maybe it's nonprofits or small schools or whoever. They previously were not allowed to apply under our current situation or our current framework, and that's one of the things we wanted desperately to fix. So that is fixed with this new program. So and that's something that I think actually addresses the Sierra Club's concerns. In fact, I heard Mayor Sharp, you mentioned your concern about Sierra Club opposing. I do want to mention we do have a broad support from a number of community stakeholders, including the Santa Clara County League of Conservation Voters, Save the Bay, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, the Open Space Authority, Sustainable Silicon Valley, Business, Labor, the local chapter of the NAACP. I mean, it enjoys broad support because it provides so many vast community benefits in this revamped, renewed program. So with that, actually, I also wanted to mention, we do have an IMC. It's the Independent Monitoring Committee. Domingo mentioned that as well. And one of the changes that we're going to make is we're modeling this program after Measure W, which passed successfully down in LA. So we've got side rails that say, hey, we don't want you to just look back. We want you to look forward for accountability. What changes might need to be made? Those two. And I understand that my CEO actually of Valley Water is on as well. So he might want to add some additional thoughts.
Okay, very good. Next we have Rick.
A follow-up question. You mentioned the current measure has problems that needs to be fixed. So what problems are there that have to be addressed? Otherwise, it's broken. Can they still speak?
Thank you, Councilmember Chow. I was struggling to unmute there. So yes, I mentioned two of them actually right out the gate, one of which is the grants program. Under the current structure that was approved by voters back in 2012, we're only allowed to release a certain number and a certain dollar amount of grants every other year. So if you're a nonprofit that wants to clean up a creek, you may have to wait 18 months to 24 months to apply for and hopefully receive that grant. This program fixes that problem. We would have this grant funding available every single year, and you would be able to apply for it every single year rather than waiting. So that's just one of the problems that we would be fixing.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead, Rick.
Unmute. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Hey, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Scharf, members of council, Rick Callender, CEO of Valley Water. I appreciate you taking into consideration. I know you had a very tough meeting tonight and have taken a lot of things under consideration. But what I did want to do is talk a little bit about the benefits of Measure S, as well as address some of the questions that were asked. I'm going to start with the why now and what was wrong with the existing program. Under the existing program, the money that we put into Safe Clean Water to deal with the homeless that we expected to run out over 15 years was completely expended within 5 years. So right now we are drawing dollars from other programs, other community services, other projects in order to deal with the pervasive growing homeless problem. What we've done is we've put additional dollars into dealing with the homeless program, knowing that it's not going to go away, but knowing that we're going to have to continue to address it. Not only does the new homeless, the proposal in Measure S allow for us to be able to do the abatements, but it also includes $500,000 each year to work with social services organizations to ensure that we can not only remove the homeless from the creeks, but do so in a humane and humanitarian fashion. Just going in, ripping tents and removing people, that's not working, and this is why we have expended all the dollars. We have to try something new. What else is wrong with the existing program? What we have to do is, after the 2017 Coyote floods, what we discovered is that we didn't have enough money to go for all the projects. So after the 2017 floods, Coyote Creek only had dollars in order to do planning. So we had to take the money from another flood protection project, and that community is probably a little bit short of screaming right now because they won't see their project because we had to go to Coyote. We did not have the dollars in the projects to get in our kitty in order to get the projects done. We've been relying on the federal government to step up and do their part, but they haven't. So when we talk about the need for local funding and local long-term funding, it will move us forward. The reason why we have major environmental groups, such as the Greenbelt Alliance, such as Save the Bay, such as many other groups, including the League of Conservation Voters, the reason why they have supported us is this would take away our thirsty need to bring in imported water, because this will look at the long-term water supply needs through incorporating programs like stormwater runoff, things that we've never done before. That'd be something that we'd be able to hopefully achieve and basically be able to look at our total local supply. Yes, we do have one group that is opposed to us, but the majority of them are there. This program not only ensures a safe, reliable supply of water, not only rebuilds Anderson Dam, which is the top thing that we heard from 21,000 people that came and filled out surveys that said, if you're going to rebuild a program, here's what we want you to see. Not only from the polls that we took, we heard the people, and what we're trying to do is be responsive to the needs of Santa Clara County to ensure a safe, reliable supply of water, reduce toxins, hazards, and contaminants in our waterways, and then provide for a new way to basically be able to provide for grants. We put $53.3 million into grants, and it allows us to be able to work with the cities in a different fashion to remove blockages. Currently, what happens is when there's a blockage in the creek, people point to whoever's portion of the creek it is, and then we can't be able to address it. This
Okay, please finish up.
I will wrap up, Mr. Mayor. This program allows for us to basically work with the city, so the city can point to us and say there's a one-stop shop, and they will pay for the removal of the blockage in our creek, and we'll do it through a grant program. I really urge your support for Measure S.
All right. Yeah, I had a question for you. So the current tax has an expiration date, but the new one never expires and has a 2% increase per year. So why did you, historically, this has not worked for parcel taxes for schools, the never ending and the automatic increases. So, what is the reason that you're trying for this? I mean, I understand why you're trying for it, but
Mr. Mayor, and those are excellent questions. And I want to back in and start with the 2% automatic increase. It does not have that in there. Opponents are putting out false information. It does allow our board to basically be able to move 2%. And over the history of the tax of the 20 years, our board has not voted every time to raise it by 2% in order to address the cost of living. The cost of construction goes up as you move forward. So that's what the allowance is for. Our board, for example, even this year did not increase it. So there is no automatic increase.
Okay.
The reason why we put it out so it can be until repealed by voters is that every 15 years, based off the model that we saw of Measure W in LA, is every 15 years, this has to be basically reconsidered, and that the board will either have to repeal, renew, or reduce the tax based on what the Independent Monitoring Committee and others bring back in the conversation. So there are side rails to bring this off, as well as the voters can take this off. And I say the reason why we're going forever is the need for safe, clean water in this community, the need to do operations and maintenance, the need to continue to provide the services that we provide don't go away in every 10 years and going back to the voters. The need is long-term. If you allow, I'll give you one more example of what occurred in the city of Alviso. My family's been out here since 1976. In 1982, Alviso flooded with 10 feet of water. We built the project. We protected Alviso. We did not have the dollars to maintain it. So just 1 week ago, we had another meeting with the city of Alviso and surrounding neighborhoods to talk about, we need to remove you again from the floodplain. That's from not having dollars for operations.
Okay. Thank you. And I just want to say that just like we have the problem with our schools now with the inequities in parcel taxes, this perpetuates it. An apartment building with 250 units will pay one parcel tax, and a single family home will pay one parcel tax.
Mr. Mayor,
it's extremely inequitable.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, that's also inaccurate. If you look at our parcel tax, there's 5 different types of parcel taxes. If you are in a townhome, if you're in an apartment, or if you're in a condominium, you're going to pay a much lesser rate than if you are a average family parcel on up to 1 acre. If you are in open space, it's based off of that. This is based off of an impervious runoff formula. Every property depends on the amount of impervious surface. You pay a different amount paid off of impervious. This is based off of what is legal under Prop 218 and under Prop 13. So that is another misnomer that people are putting out about the parcel tax. There is not one rate.
All right, thank you. Next we go to Zach Jang. Welcome, Zach.
I disagree with Proposition 16, as success should be merit-based rather than based on race. Therefore, please say no to Proposition 16. Thank you, and that is all I have to say.
Wonderful. Thank you for being brief. Next, Venkat Raghunathan. Welcome. You there, Venkat? Okay, Venkat is not speaking. We will go on to Madhuri Kishore. Welcome.
Hi, I come from a country, this is with regards to Proposition 16, and I
Okay.
come from a country where there is quota system and it has never worked. And I absolutely vote against it. It's knowing the difference between right and wrong. We should be instead focusing on the root cause, which is fixing the achievement gap in our education system. Let's not create more divisiveness in the community. Let's make it merit-based so it's fair to all the communities. Thank you. Vote no on Prop 16.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So I'll bring it back to council. What I heard from the council members, I think it would be, I think there's a general consensus that the city should not be taking positions one way or another on these. Are there any of these that somebody would like to take a vote on to take a position, or should we just take a vote to abstain on all of them?
And to abstain on all of the items before us here on this item.
Okay.
second.
It's not a motion. I'll bring that motion. I would.
All right.
I would move that we abstain from all measures in front of us in terms of representing council and the Cupertino community on our position on these respective measures in front of the electorate.
Okay, fair enough. And that's, if this passes, that's how I will vote on Thursday at the Cities Association. So I will second it. And we can vote.
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Okay, next we are on to, let's see, item, hold on, my agenda got screwed up here. Consent 7. Okay, we are on to item 10. What time is it now? It's 9:20. We've been going for 2.5 hours. So let's take 5 minutes before we go on to item 10 and resume at 9:26.